Chapter 1331. The four of them formed an encirclement around Chu Mu to prevent Chu Mu from escaping. With the heaven-sword in his right hand and the immortal sword in his left, Chu Mu was going to use the dual sword technique to fight with all his might. He Zijian was proficient in sorcery, but he did not have much experience in swordsmanship. Blue streams of water surrounded his body, protecting him. With the presence of the water force field, his defense was even stronger. Streams of blue light flowed around He Zijian's body. They were like rivers, surging with waves, displaying He Zijian's astonishing attainments in the Tao of sorcery. This was also the first time that Chu Mu saw the elegance of a cultivator who was proficient in spiritual arts. Water technique, grand waterfall burial. He Zijian's long hair fluttered in the wind. Blue light flickered in his eyes. His hands quickly formed a seal. The water force around him fluctuated violently, as if an ocean was being overturned. Rumbling sounds were earth-shattering. In the void, a blue tide suddenly appeared. It was as high as 100 meters. Suddenly, it surged violently, as if it was going to destroy the world. The power made Chu Mu's expression change drastically. The water technique that was full of destructive power was terrifying beyond compare. It was as if it was going to bury the entire sky, along with Chu Mu. The 3/7 sky of Nirvana realm cultivators were delighted. They quickly retreated to avoid being affected. They felt that under He Zijian's grand waterfall burial water technique, even an 8th sky of Nirvana realm cultivator would die without a doubt, let alone an early 4th sky of Nirvana realm cultivator. The difference between each sky was 10 times. They felt that under He Zijian's water technique, Chu Mu would die without a doubt. By then, even his bones would be hard to find. Chu Mu's spiritual world was in turmoil, and his spiritual force felt like it was about to explode. This was brought about by an extremely strong sense of crisis. Under the metal force field, the light from the sky/sword was extremely bright and dazzling. Then, a dark silver light appeared and wrapped around the sword like silk. After the sword trembled slightly, the 5 elements sharp metal sword attacked. The terrifying golden sword light was 8 times stronger under the support of the level 7 sword energy. The might of the 5 elemental sharp metal sword was indescribable. Even the sky could not withstand this sword and was directly cut open, leaving a pitch-black mark. The expressions of the 3/7 sky of Nirvana realm cultivators changed drastically. This sword was too terrifying. If Chu Mu had used this sword, then their attacks would have been difficult to break through. However, if he had used this sword, then it would have been easier for them to react. After all, it would take a little bit of time to stimulate and fuse the sword force into the sword force. The 5 elements sharp metal sword slashed down. The 100-meter-long golden sword light cut through the sky, leaving a pitch-black mark, and slashed towards the great waterfall burial water technique. Then, Chu Mu withdrew the metal force field and quickly released the water force field. The imperishable sword was raised, and the azure light surged like water waves. Vaguely, everyone seemed to hear the sound of flowing water. As the sword slashed out, the azure sword light flowed out like flowing water. It seemed soft, but it was actually extremely tough, constantly attacking. The golden sword light collided with the great waterfall burial water technique. In an instant, the violent and destructive great waterfall burial water technique was cut open by the golden sword light. The golden sword light slashed towards He Zijian, but the great waterfall burial water technique's power did not decrease after it was cut in half. It still rushed towards Chu Mu. The azure sword light of the 5 elements flowing water sword slashed down like a surging wave. It collided with the great waterfall burial water technique once again. Immediately, the two forces clashed continuously. He Zijian's expression changed drastically. The golden sword light was incomparably sharp, and he felt as if his body was being torn apart, and nothing could stop it. The water force field could not resist the golden sword light and was broken. He Zijian had already used both of his hands to cast a new spell. Suddenly, a shield of water appeared in front of him. The water in the shield spun continuously like a vortex, blocking the attack of the golden sword light. In the end, when the golden sword light and the water shield whirlpool both dissipated, Chu Mu burst out with his fastest speed and attacked one of the seventh sky of Nirvana realm cultivators. He Zijian mastered the water force field. The other three seventh sky of Nirvana realm cultivators mastered the fire force field, wind force field, and earth force field respectively. The one that Chu Mu wanted to attack was the earth force field. The five elements restrained each other. Wood restrained earth. Chu Mu withdrew the water force field and switched to the wood force field to attack the opponent's force field. Immediately after, the sky beheading sword was covered in green light. He raised the sword and cast the five elements green wood sword. The green sword light was endless. It pierced through the opponent's earth force field. It was unstoppable. Let me help you. The two seventh sky of Nirvana realm cultivators at the side quickly made their move. Chu Mu also realized that with his current strength, it was very difficult to fight against 3/7 sky of Nirvana realm cultivators and 1/8 sky of Nirvana realm cultivator. Especially when the 3/7 sky of Nirvana realm cultivators could entangle him while the 8th sky of Nirvana realm cultivator could cast a terrifying technique attack. However, he didn't retreat. A powerful opponent brought about a life and death crisis. Under this kind of pressure, he could improve better. Chu Mu already felt that he had improved. That was the application of the five elements' secret art. The five elements' secret arts cooperated with the five elements' force field. In addition, he could replace the five elements' force fields with the five elements' secret art. Gradually, Chu Mu became more and more familiar with the alternating application of the five elements' secret arts and the five elements' force field. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped something. As for He Zijian and the other three, they were very shocked. Originally, they thought that with the four of them, it would be easy to capture the opponent. They didn't expect the opponent's strength to be so unexpected. They were shocked and had no choice but to give the order to kill. Under the full force of the attack, the opponent was still able to resist tenaciously. Although he showed signs of being at a disadvantage, he couldn't be killed. Occasionally, they would hit him and injure him, but for some unknown reason, he would quickly recover. That's right, starting from the second nirvana, every nirvana after Chu Mu's nirvana, the life force in his flesh would become even stronger. The result was that his body would become even more vigorous. Light injuries would instantly heal, and even heavy injuries would quickly heal and be healed in a short period of time. Such a difficult opponent gave the four core disciples of the Skyblaze sect a headache. With the ability to heal quickly, Chu Mu was able to fight to his heart's content. The metal force field unfolded, and the golden sword light pierced through the air. The five elements' sharp metal sword's power was peerless. Immediately after, the metal force field switched to the water force field, and the five elements' flowing water sword slashed out. When the two sword arts interchanged, they faintly had the effect of complementing each other. In the five elements, metal gave birth to water. The metal force field immediately switched to the water force field. If the timing of the switch was good enough, the water force field would be aided by the metal force field and become stronger. Naturally, the five elements flowing water sword would also be aided by the metal force field, and its power would increase by 30%. But at present, Chu Mu could only do so much. It was difficult for him to perform the third sword, let alone the fourth or fifth sword. In his imagination, if he could perform the fifth sword, the power of the final sword would be extremely tyrannical. If he could perfectly master it, then its power would be unimaginable. The four core disciples of the Skyblaze sect were Chu Mu's practice stones. He used them to hone his sword art, and unknowingly improve it. Once again, he slashed out with his sword. The azure sword light was endless. It carried an extremely frightening might as it charged forward. Wave after wave, it was extremely powerful. The expressions of He Zijian and the others changed greatly. Only now did they realize that this opponent was not only extremely tenacious and difficult to deal with, but his strength had also increased compared to before. It was as if he was using the four of them as practice targets. When this thought popped up in their minds, the four immediately felt ashamed and angry. They were the core disciples of the Skyblaze sect with high Nirvana realm cultivation, but they were being used as practice stones by a cultivator with a mere Nirvana realm cultivation base. The feelings in their hearts were extremely complicated. Water art, tidal explosion. He Zijian flew into a rage out of humiliation. He ignored the consumption of his strength and performed the most tyrannical water art he had mastered so far. A rumbling sound resounded through the world. The entire sky seemed to be flooded by a vast ocean. Terrifying waves crazily rolled, as if they could destroy heaven and earth. The power was enough to make one tremble. Chumu's face changed. The power of this water technique was many times stronger than the previous technique, Great Waterfall Burial. I can't resist it. Chumu instantly judged. The power of this move was too tyrannical. It was like the fury of nature. In front of this move, his strength was not enough. The difference was too great. Unless he disregarded the price, but if he did that, he would be heavily injured. The gains did not make up for the losses. Chumu made the judgment in an instant. He quickly performed the fire force field and then unleashed the 5 elements raging flame sword. Immediately, the fire force field was switched to the earth force field. Fire gave birth to earth, and the earth force field was strengthened by 30%. The sword slashed out, and a heavy feeling was like a mountain descending. 5 elements thick earth sword. With the enhancement, the 5 elements thick earth sword's power was even stronger. The brown sword light turned into a thick earth, and like a mountain, it crashed into the terrifying tide. In the instant of the collision, the tide surged violently. The terrifying waves suddenly exploded, and the brown sword light shattered. The terrifying aftershock wreaked havoc in all directions. The area within 10,000 meters was completely enveloped. No one dared to approach. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chumu took out the flying ship and quickly entered it. He activated the flying ship, and without caring about the damage to the flying ship, he directly activated it to its maximum speed. With a boom, the void seemed to explode. The air within several hundred meters shook, turning into a vacuum. Previously, he didn't do this in the school because he didn't want to damage the school's buildings. Quickly leaving was much faster than using the flying heaven sword art. By the time He Zijian and the others noticed Chumu's departure, it was already 10 breaths later. With the flying ship's speed, it had already flown 100,000 meters away. Chase, He Zijian said gloomily. He took out the flying ship, and the 4 of them quickly chased after him. If such a terrifying monster escaped and grew up, it would be very disadvantageous for them. They had to kill him. Chapter 1332. The sky was clear and the clouds were sparse. The sky was blue and deep. A flaming meteor streaked across the blue sky, leaving behind a dark red trail and thick smoke. With a boom, a figure flew out from the huge burning fireball. Another boom rang out, and the ground trembled as the huge fireball smashed into a mountain, causing a heaven-shaking explosion. Terrifying shockwaves spread out in all directions, and everything within hundreds of thousands of meters was obliterated. Mountains and rocks were reduced to dust, and huge flames soared into the sky, seeming to burn down the sky. The rumbling tremors lasted for dozens of breaths before calming down. What terrifying power, Chumu said to himself as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Fortunately, he had left the flying ship in time. Otherwise, if the flying ship had crashed into the mountain and exploded, even if he didn't die, he would have been seriously injured. He was being chased by He Zijian and the other 3's flying ship. Their flying ship was faster and had the ability to attack. Chumu controlled the flying ship to dodge, and he had no choice but to increase the speed of the flying ship to exceed the limit. As expected, he managed to shake them off. However, after a long time, the flying ship was also seriously damaged, resulting in the current situation. Li family, fire god sect. Silently muttering to himself, Chu Mu's lips curled into a sneer as his eyes flickered with a cold glint. He would remember that when he was strong enough, he would definitely take revenge. Suppressing this thought, Chu Mu flew in the direction of the explosion. Everything within 100,000 meters was charred black. He could still see black smoke rising in spirals. Chu Mu couldn't help but feel that it was a pity that his only flying ship was gone. The flying ship's speed was faster than his flying speed, and it didn't need to consume his own energy. Of course, it needed to consume the energy of his Yuan Dan. But no matter what, it was still a good thing to have a flying ship. After entering the mountain, Chu Mu scanned the area with his divine remembrance. Not long after, Chu Mu caught a weak aura fluctuation. That was a weak life force, a life force that was on the verge of death. It was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. With a flash, Chu Mu moved quickly and saw a person lying in a pool of blood. The person's body was covered in blood, and the blood was covered in ashes. It was impossible to see the person's original appearance. The weak aura of life came from this person. After pondering for a moment, Chu Mu approached the person. He opened his palm, and with a distance of 1/2 meter, he guided the life force of the wood form to turn it into a wisp of green. It spread out from his palm and shot towards the person on the ground. The green light entered the person's body, and the life force quickly spread out. The life force that was so weak that it was on the verge of extinction increased a little. His injuries are too severe. Chu Mu didn't attack again. This person's injuries were extremely severe. Unless he released a large amount of vitality, only then would he be able to heal some of his injuries and preserve his life. However, the price he had to pay was that the source of his wood aspect had been severely shrunk. It was impossible for Chu Mu to be so selfless towards a stranger who he didn't know was good or bad. It wasn't difficult to replenish the life force of the wood aspect, but it wasn't easy to replenish too much of it. This was one of the things he relied on in this strange world. "Why you?" The heavily injured person stuttered, gasping for breath. Seeing how the person was, Chu Mu took out a few pills and dissolved them with his sword origin. They turned into a strand of energy that flowed into the person's mouth and into his stomach. These were healing pills. After the pills were dissolved, the person was slightly replenished, and his life force seemed to have become slightly stronger. I'm the Vice Sect Master of the True Sword Sect." The person stuttered. I can't make it. I don't care who you are. I beg you to give this to Elder Yun Feng of the True Sword Sect. I'll use all my savings as a reward." His voice was weak and stuttering. When he finally finished speaking, an irregular triangular object appeared in his hand. It seemed like the tip of a sword. The person handed over the triangular object that looked like the tip of a sword. As soon as Chu Mu touched it, it suddenly trembled. With a buzzing sound, it released a pure milky white luster that grew brighter and brighter. A surge of energy surged out of the heavily injured person. His eyes widened, and his face was filled with shock and excitement. You, the True Sword Sect's spiritual seal, sect master," as he stuttered, perhaps because he was overly excited, his injuries flared up. His entire body suddenly trembled, and his body straightened. Immediately after, a mouthful of black blood spurted out from his open mouth like an arrow. Soon after, he fell back stiffly. With a bang, he stopped moving and his life force dissipated. He was dead. Chu Mu was stunned. "He's dead," Chu Mu muttered to himself, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. If he knew that this person was not supposed to die, and that he was only heavily injured and struck by the terrifying shockwave from the explosion of the flying ship, which aggravated his injuries to the point where he could not be healed, who knew what he would think? The triangular object in his hand still let out a milky white light. It radiated in bursts, and it contained a strange pulse of energy. The true sword sect. He looked at the glowing object in his hand before shifting his gaze to the mangled corpse on the ground. His mind spun rapidly, and his thoughts gradually cleared up. Regardless of what the true sword sect was, the person who had died was the so-called vice sect master of the true sword sect. Why had he died? Looking at how he was so heavily injured that he could not be healed, he had probably been beaten up by someone. He had managed to escape, but he had collapsed here because his injuries were too severe. Afterwards, he was discovered. The vice sect master knew that he could not be healed, and he knew that he did not have long to live. After seeing Jian Chen, he placed a sliver of hope on him, which was to use all the savings in his space ring as a reward to entrust Jian Chen with the glowing, milky white triangle to the people of the true sword sect. According to the vice sect master's agitated words before he died, this thing should be called the sword sect spiritual seal. It was likely that the sword sect spiritual seal was something very important to the true sword sect. It was probably a token. The sword sect spiritual seal. The sect master. Chumu gradually made sense of things. He had been present throughout the entire process. He could be said to have participated in it all, so he remembered all the changes very clearly. When the vice sect master of the true sword sect took out the sword sect spiritual seal, it did not glow. Only when Jian Chen took it from him did the sword sect spiritual seal shudder and let out a continuous, milky white light. It was because the vice sect master saw this change that he suddenly became agitated. In the end, he said something that no one could understand. Afterwards, his injuries flared up due to excessive agitation, and he died. With just a few words, everything that had happened in a short amount of time was roughly deduced by Chu Mu with his great mental abilities. Could it be that the highest authority in the so-called true sword sect is only the vice sect master and not the sect master? Only those who have gained the recognition of the sword sect spiritual seal can become sect master? After making sense of things, a thought leapt into Chu Mu's head. After thinking about it carefully, this seemed to be a possibility. However, he smiled. Even if it was true, he didn't mind. He put the sword sect spirit seal into his portable pocket space, then took the man's spatial ring. Then, he picked a spot and dug a hole. Then, he placed the man's corpse into the hole and buried it. Using his fingers like a sword, he sliced through the air. A boulder that was as fragile as tofu was cut into the shape of a tombstone by Chu Mu. Using his fingers like a pen, he carved out a line of words on the tombstone. Tomb of the True Sword Sect's Vice Sect Master. Placing the tombstone in place, he could give the Vice Sect Master an explanation. After doing all this, only then did Chu Mu carefully inspect the Vice Sect Master's space ring. There were some pills, quite a few yuan cores, some swords, a few cultivation method manuals, some spiritual herbs, some metal ores, and so on. These things could be considered the normal reserves of every cultivator. However, some were more common and some were more precious. Chu Mu did not pay too much attention to these things. However, these things could be considered as a part of Chu Mu's reserves, causing his wealth to increase once again. In addition, Chu Mu also found some nirvana chi, but it was not much. It was not enough for him to undergo the fifth nirvana. Of course, there was still quite some time before the fifth nirvana. His cultivation was only at the early stage of the fourth heavenly layer, not the peak. Immediately afterwards, Chu Mu's eyes lit up. With a thought, a flying ship appeared out of thin air. It was the flying ship from the Vice Sect Master's space ring. This flying ship was about the same size as the previous one, but in terms of style, shape, and so on, it was much better. The entire flying ship was sword-shaped. It looked like a giant sword. The flying ship was not very spacious. It could barely accommodate 2 people, but it was very comfortable to accommodate 1 person. It was called the Giant Sword. After entering the Giant Sword and studying it for a while, Chu Mu mastered the piloting method of the giant sword. He activated the giant sword, and it rose into the air. Then, a virtual flame shot out from the tail. With a boom, the giant sword instantly shot out. Its speed was much faster than the previous shuttle-shaped flying ship. Chu Mu was sure that if it was at full speed, its speed would be much faster than the previous shuttle-shaped flying ship that exceeded its limit. If he had used this flying ship before, He Zijian and the other three would not have been able to catch up to him, let alone cause his flying ship to exceed its limit and be destroyed. Moreover, this giant sword flying ship actually had the ability to attack. It had two forms. One could shoot a ray of light from the front. It was very powerful. Chu Mu even deliberately tried it. With one shot, it could pierce through a mountain rock. Its penetrating power was very terrifying. Its attack power was probably something that even an 8th heavenly layer nirvana cultivator would not be able to resist. The second form of attack was to shoot out a ball of cannon fire. After hitting the target, it would explode and cause area damage. Chu Mu also tried it. The range of this attack was about 1,000 meters. Its power was weaker than the first form, but it could still threaten a 7th heavenly layer nirvana cultivator. No matter what form of attack it would consume energy every time. It was about the energy of 100 high-grade origin cores. Chapter 1333. A flying ship flew to a mountain and landed. A few people rushed out of the flying ship. Their robes were of the same style. Obviously, they were from the same faction. "Look around," the leader, an old man, said coldly. "Yes." Everyone immediately spread out and searched around. Not long after, they found the broken pieces left behind by the explosion of a flying ship. "Keep looking," the old man said coldly. After searching for a while, they found the grave. The grave of the true sword sex vice sect master. The old man smiled sinisterly. "Dig it up and see if it's real." The grave was dug up and the corpse was taken out. After careful inspection, the old man smiled. "Fu Wenxing, no matter how you escape, you will still die in the end." Immediately, the old man's expression changed drastically, as if he had thought of something important. He scanned the corpse with his powerful divine sense very carefully. He did not miss anything inside or out. "It's gone, it's gone." Although he had thought of it before, after careful inspection, the old man still found it hard to accept. "Damn Fu Wenxing. Even if he died, he still wanted to kill me," the old man said angrily. With a wave of his hand, a powerful force bombarded the corpse, causing it to shatter. "The sword sex spiritual seal should be mine." The old man was furious. "No matter what, we must find it." Everyone immediately searched around, not letting go of any clues. In the end, they confirmed that someone had indeed been here and had left not long ago. It was very likely that this person had taken away the sword sex spiritual seal. They could only confirm that it was a person. It was not easy to find the person, but the old man would definitely not give up because the sword sex spiritual seal was very important. The wide road led to an unknown place. In the sky above the road, a figure was flying quickly. It was Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, he had flown hundreds of meters away. Using the giant sword flying ship, the speed was indeed very fast, but the problem was that the energy consumption was also very fast. His inner core was being consumed like it was worthless. In addition, Chu Mu did not know where to go at the moment. Without a clear destination, he simply put away the flying ship and flew at a normal speed. This method was the most energy-conserving method. To him, it could be said that he did not consume any energy at all. At this moment, a few silhouettes appeared in front of them. Their speed was extremely fast, and they quickly flew over. They seemed to be in a sorry state. Following behind those silhouettes were close to 10 silhouettes. Their speed was also very fast. Furthermore, they were surging with killing intent. It would appear that they were pursuers. This was a play between the pursuer and the hunted. Although Chu Mu didn't know why he encountered this, it had nothing to do with him. He didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. However, he quickly changed his mind because his sensitive hearing had heard the other party's words. Although it was incomplete, Chu Mu was sure that he had indeed heard the words, True Sword Sect. Since it was related to the True Sword Sect, Chu Mu had no choice but to interfere. Get out of the way. Seeing Chu Mu appear in front of them, the pursuers hurriedly shouted. However, there was nothing they could do. Chu Mu's goal was to stop them. With a slash of his sword golden light shone in the sky. It seemed to have cut off the sky, forcing the pursuers to stop. The golden sword light was too sharp. If they collided with it, they would definitely die. With this delay, the 9 people behind caught up and quickly surrounded them, including Chu Mu. Li Xiao, I've said it before. You won't be able to escape, sneered the leader of the pursuers. He was a one-eyed man. The pursuers did not say anything. Instead, they glared at Chu Mu viciously. They felt that it was because of Chu Mu's interception that they had been caught up and surrounded. Friend, thank you for stopping us. However, leave the rest to us. Back off so you don't get caught in the crossfire. You're disciples of the True Sword Sect? Chu Mu ignored them. Instead, he looked at the people he had stopped and asked. You've asked the right question. We're all disciples of the True Sword Sect. However, these people are traitors of the True Sword Sect, said the one-eyed man. Hong Li, you're the traitors, Li Xiao said angrily. When the Vice Sect Master returns, you'll regret it. How many Vice Sect Masters are there in the True Sword Sect? Chu Mu asked. 1, someone replied. Chu Mu immediately understood. The person who had given him the True Sword Sect's spirit seal was the only Vice Sect Master of the True Sword Sect. Then, according to these people, the pursuers belonged to the Vice Sect Master, while the pursuers were enemies. With the situation clear, Chu Mu naturally knew what to do. I'll give you a chance. Leave now. The further the better. Chu Mu looked at the one-eyed man and said indifferently. The 9 one-eyed men were stunned at first. Then they laughed. Since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, don't blame us for being ruthless. The one-eyed man sneered. In his eyes, Chu Mu's aura wasn't strong. Combined with Chu Mu's appearance and his young age, he felt that Chu Mu's strength wasn't that strong. Moreover, there were 9 of them. The one-eyed man's cultivation was the highest, at the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm. The other 8 were all at the 2nd sky of Nirvana realm. Seems like you won't listen to my advice, Chu Mu said indifferently. Then, he pointed his finger like a sword and slashed through the void. The golden sword light was like a thread that circled around. In an instant, other than the one-eyed man who sensed danger and quickly dodged, the other 8 didn't have time. They all felt a pain in their necks. Then, their vision turned dark because their heads were cut off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. Their corpses fell. Dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at Chu Mu at a loss. The one-eyed man's face was filled with shock. His face was pale and his body was trembling. He didn't even draw his sword. He didn't even use any powerful sword technique. He actually killed 8 of his junior brothers. Each of them was at the 2nd sky of Nirvana realm. Suddenly, the one-eyed man burst out with all his speed. He didn't attack, but ran away. However, since Chu Mu had made his move, he wouldn't let him run away. He pointed his sword finger. In an instant, a golden light pierced through the sky like a meteor. It penetrated the one-eyed man's head from the back and came out between his eyebrows. The one-eyed man widened his eyes in shock. His corpse fell. Li Xiao and the other 3 were trembling. Li Xiao's cultivation was the highest, at the early 3rd sky of Nirvana realm. The other 3 were at the 2nd sky of Nirvana realm. Even the one-eyed man was killed in an instant, let alone them. Do you know where Elder Yunfeng is? Chu Mu stared at Li Xiao and asked slowly, Your Vice Sect leader asked me to pass on a message to him. Do you know our Vice Sect leader? Li Xiao didn't answer. Instead, he asked cautiously. I do. Chu Mu said. May I ask where our vice sect leader is? Li Xiao and the other three were excited. Take me to see Elder Yunfeng, Chu Mu said. Okay, I'll take you there. Li Xiao pondered for a moment and said. Chu Mu nodded and quickly left with Li Xiao and the other three. However, before he left, he took all the interspatial rings from the 9 people he killed. Those were his spoils of war. Li Xiao and the other three led Chu Mu into a city. After several twists and turns in the streets, they came to an ordinary courtyard and knocked on the door. Chu Mu noticed the way Li Xiao knocked on the door. There was a certain pattern. It was obviously a secret signal. The door opened. Li Xiao and the other three entered first while Chu Mu waited outside. After a while, the door opened again. It was Li Xiao who led Chu Mu in. Sir, this is Elder Yunfeng. After leading Chu Mu inside, Li Xiao gestured to a middle-aged man with a small beard and introduced him. Elder Yunfeng exuded a scholarly aura. Sir, may I ask where our vice sect leader is now? Elder Yunfeng's eyes lit up as he asked. He's dead, Chu Mu said indifferently. Instantly, Elder Yunfeng and Li Xiao's eyes widened. Their faces were filled with astonishment and shock. They didn't know what to do. Sir, please don't joke. Elder Yunfeng reacted and said. I'm not joking. When I met your vice sect leader, he was heavily injured and on the verge of death. Chu Mu said. Before he died, he asked me to bring the Sword Sect spiritual seal to you. Sword Sect spiritual seal. Chu Mu revealed another piece of shocking news. Li Xiao and Elder Yunfeng felt their minds in a mess. Sword Sect spiritual seal. Vice sect leader is dead. After a long while, Elder Yunfeng forced himself to calm down. Although the vice sect leader's death was sad, when he thought about how he was hunted down and injured, he wasn't that surprised. Although the vice sect leader's death was a pity, the most important thing was that the Sword Sect spiritual seal wasn't lost. Instead, he was asked to bring it back. Sir, where's the Sword Sect spiritual seal? Elder Yunfeng asked excitedly. It wasn't that he was cold-blooded, but the vice sect leader's life couldn't be compared to the Sword Sect spiritual seal. Because the vice sect leader represented one person, while the Sword Sect spiritual seal was the inheritance of the true Sword Sect. It was a symbol that represented everyone. It was clear which was more important. In Yunfeng's opinion, even his own life couldn't be compared to the Sword Sect spiritual seal. Chu Mu took out the Sword Sect spiritual seal. The moment the Sword Sect spiritual seal appeared in Chu Mu's hand, it immediately trembled and emitted a milky white light. Li Xiao and Yunfeng both stared blankly at the glowing Sword Sect spiritual seal, dumbfounded. Elder. Li Xiao stuttered, the Sword Sect spiritual seal is glowing white. I know. Yunfeng also stuttered a little. Chu Mu handed the Sword Sect spiritual seal over. Unexpectedly, Yunfeng subconsciously took 3 steps back. When he reacted, he directly knelt down and shouted, Elder Yunfeng greets the sect leader. Disciple Li Xiao greets the sect leader. Li Xiao also reacted and immediately took a few steps back. After Elder Yunfeng, he knelt down before Chu Mu and shouted. Chu Mu was stunned. He realized that his previous guess was true. Because the Sword Sect spiritual seal was glowing for some reason, he was recognized as the sect leader of the true Sword Sect. In other words, the Sword Sect spiritual seal had its own function. If one obtained its recognition, they could become the sect leader of the true Sword Sect. Chapter 1334. It's like forcing a duck onto a perch. Chu Mu looked at the group of people kneeling down and shouting greetings, Sect Master, and was speechless. His first reaction was to refuse because he wasn't from the deep blue world. He only came here to complete the mission given by the Heavenly Sword Hall. The second reason was that he didn't want to spend his time on the management of the sect. Another thought popped up. If he wanted to find the location of the world spirit, it would be very difficult to do it alone. After all, a person's strength was limited. However, if he had the help of others, especially the help of a force, it would undoubtedly be much faster. Therefore, Chu Mu was thinking, weighing the pros and cons. You all can stand up first. Elder Yun Feng, let's talk. Chu Mu said. The others retreated, only Chu Mu and Elder Yun Feng stayed behind. Sect Master, please speak. Elder Yun Feng was very respectful to Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu knew that it was because he made the Heavenly Sword Sect Spirit Seal emit a white light. Give me a detailed introduction of the True Sword Sect. Chu Mu said. He didn't know much about the sects and forces in the Deep Blue World. He didn't know what kind of sect the True Sword Sect was. Sect leader, our True Sword Sect has a long history. It's said that we have tens of thousands of years of history. Elder Yun Feng immediately began to introduce the True Sword Sect in detail. What he said at the beginning was a saying that had been passed down from generation to generation in the True Sword Sect, and how awesome the True Sword Sect was in the past. Chu Mu didn't interrupt and just listened quietly. According to Elder Yun Feng, a long, long time ago, who knew how long ago, the True Sword Sect had another name, the True God Sword Sect. True God Sword Sect. Chu Mu was very surprised when he heard it. This name was much more impressive than the True Sword Sect. Then, Chu Mu heard another piece of news that shocked him. The reason why the True God Sword Sect was called that was because the founder of the Sword Sect was a sword god. Sword god. A supreme existence. The founder of the True God Sword Sect was actually a sword god. It's just a legend. Whether it's true or not, there's no way to verify it. Elder Yun Feng said. Indeed, it had been many, many years since a sword god had appeared in the 4 great star fields of the human race. In this deep blue world, a sword god probably didn't exist either. If the founder of the True God Sword Sect was a sword god, it was enough to show that the True God Sword Sect had a long history that could be traced back to before the fall of the gods. No one knew when it started, but the True God Sword Sect changed its name to the True Sword Sect. It refused to accept its past glory and declined. The current True Sword Sect had already fallen to a certain extent. The True Sword Sect was a sect that specialized in swordsmanship and never touched upon magical arts. This was the sect's rule. Thus, when the True Sword Sect selected disciples, they only looked at their talent in swordsmanship and never cared about magical arts. Cultivate in the sword, be proficient in the sword, and be sincere in the sword. This was the motto of the True Sword Sect. Until now, the True Sword Sect had also had a sect master. However, it had been hundreds of years since his fall and no sect master had appeared. Usually, there would only be a vice sect master in charge of the True Sword Sect's affairs. This was because the True Sword Sect had a saying that only those who could make the Sword Sect's spirit seal react and emit a milky white light were qualified to become the sect master of the True Sword Sect. In the past, there were people in the True Sword Sect who had proposed a reform. The Sword Sect couldn't be without a leader. However, they were all rejected by the Sword Sect's supreme elders. This time, the reason why there was a rebellion was because the supreme elders had made a decision. The person who held the Sword Sect's spirit seal could become the acting sect master of the True Sword Sect. To a certain extent, the acting sect master was superior to the vice sect master. First, one could become the acting sect master. Then, one could become the sect master. It was also because of this that the True Sword Sect had internal strife. Great Elder Yun Yi was not satisfied with the position of elder. He wanted to be the sect master. He had to start from the acting sect master. Thus, he started the rebellion. Is the Sword Sect Spirit Seal just a symbol of the sect master? After understanding the whole story, Chu Mu asked again. It's not just a symbol. It's said that it also contains a great secret, Elder Yun Feng said with a bitter smile. Elder Yun Feng said. Soon after, he bitterly smiled and continued. However, none of the past sect leaders managed to unravel the secret of the Sword Sect Spirit Seal. As time passed, they no longer cared about it. The sword sect spirit seal is more of a symbol of status. Chu Mu could not help but think. If what Elder Yunfeng said was true, then the sword sect spirit seal was a great treasure left behind from the era before the gods had fallen. In that case, the secret it contained would undoubtedly be extremely shocking. Speaking of which, Chu Mu was extremely curious about the era before the gods had fallen. He had a great desire to investigate it. However, there was just far too little information about the era before the gods had fallen. It could even be said that there was a gap. After the gap, there was basically no information about the battle of the gods. It was only a guess that the gods had fallen because of the battle between the gods. As for the truth, many people had been trying to verify it, but they had been unable to find anything. Of course, there were also a few scholars who specialized in the battle of the gods. Perhaps they knew even more, but they did not publicize it. The sword sect spirit seal was something that had been passed down from the era of the gods. Just this fact alone made its value immeasurable, not to mention that it might contain great secrets. I can take on the role of sect master, but I probably won't have much time to manage it, said Chu Mu. The sect has its rules. The sect master doesn't really need to manage it, said Elder Yunfeng happily. Although the sword sect spirit seal had reacted, it would be pointless if Chu Mu did not agree. Chu Mu nodded. Sect master, since that's the case, let's head to the sword sect right now and see the group of great elders. We'll decide on the position of sect master so that nothing unexpected happens, said Elder Yunfeng. Yunfeng and Chu Mu quickly left this place, leaving the others behind for the time being. The true sword sect was located in Ancient Beast Mountain. Speaking of which, the once glorious true sword sect was now living in a small mountain like Ancient Beast Mountain. It was really depressing. However, the current true sword sect was no longer as glorious as before. The dead vice sect master was only at the 8th sky of Nirvana realm. Great Elder Yun-Yi was only at the peak of the 8th sky of Nirvana realm. As for second Elder Yunfeng, his cultivation was at the peak of the 7th sky of Nirvana realm. As for the elders of the group of great elders, they were all at the eternal realm. There were only 7 of them, but each of them was a sword saint. Speaking of which, the overall strength of the true sword sect was stronger than the Li family, but it could not be compared to the Skyblaze sect. However, Chu Mu's idea of taking on the role of sect master was to use the disciples of the true sword sect to gather information. He did not plan to use the true sword sect to fight against other forces. The true sword sect of Ancient Beast Mountain had already been occupied by Elder Yun-Yi and the others. Chu Mu and Yunfeng's arrival was like entering the mouth of a pack of wolves. However, the great elders were also cultivating in seclusion in the Ancient Beast Mountain, so they had no choice but to come. The elders and disciples who belonged to the vice sect masters group had all left, leaving only the disciples under Elder Yun-Yi. When Chu Mu and Yunfeng arrived, they were surrounded. Fighting was inevitable, but they could not kill because these people were all disciples of the true sword sect. Fortunately, Chu Mu and Yunfeng's strength was extraordinary, so defeating these disciples was a piece of cake. Yunfeng also took the opportunity to observe Chu Mu's strength. He found that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was exquisite, and even he could not compare to it. He was amazed. Yunfeng, you still dare to come here? Yun-He, the third elder, said coldly. He belonged to great Elder Yun-Yi's group. Yun-He, come and greet the sect master, Yunfeng said. Yunfeng, are you stupid? Where did it come from? Just as he was mocking, Yun-He's eyes suddenly widened. He stared blankly at the glowing sword sect spirit seal in Chu Mu's hand and spat out 2 words with difficulty. Sect master, did you see that, Yun-He? The sword sect spirit seal has chosen its master. Yunfeng smiled and said, Yun-Yi's rebellion ends here. He will receive the punishment he deserves. Impossible. This is fate. Yun-He could not accept it for a moment. Speaking of which, although he belonged to great Elder Yun-Yi's group, He did not have any thoughts of rebelling. However, he thought that the sword sect could not be without a master for a long time. Look at how the true sword sect had declined over the past few hundred years. The reason why he supported Yun-Yi was because Yun-Yi himself was quite capable. As long as the true sword sect could develop, he would support it. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we ask the great elders to verify it, Yun-Feng said. Yun-He's expression changed back and forth. Yun-He, we're all working hard for the development of the true sword sect. It's only because of different ideals that there's a conflict. But now, the sword sect spirit seal has chosen its master. Our true sword sect has a sect master. For the sword sect, it's definitely a good thing. Yun-Feng understood Yun-He and said, I hope you're not lying to me. Yun-He thought for a moment and glanced at Chu-Mu. With Elder Yun-He leading the way, Chu-Mu and Elder Yun-Feng did not encounter any obstruction. In fact, the true sword sect had a fourth elder, but he had died in this rebellion. Within the true sword sect, the great elders had a lofty status. Usually, only the vice-sect master could contact the great elders. However, the vice-sect master had died, so the elders had the right to contact him. This was especially so when it was related to something as important as the sword sect spirit seal choosing its master and sect master. The 7 great elders of the Great Elder Group actually had a division of labor. They took turns to be on duty. One of them would maintain a certain level of contact with the vice-sect master or elder of the true sword sect, so they would not enter complete seclusion. The other 6 would enter complete seclusion. They would only be called out when it concerned the life or death of the true sword sect. This time, it was the 6th great elder's turn to be on duty. After receiving the news, he was stunned at first. He did not immediately summon the other great elders. Instead, he came out of seclusion first to confirm the truth of the matter. If it was true, it would not be too late to summon the other 6 great elders. Who told the sword sect spirit seal to choose its master? Before the 6th great elder had even appeared, a tremendous presence arrived first, causing everyone's expressions to change. Afterwards, his voice quickly rang out in everyone's ears. Chapter 1335. With a whoosh, a figure appeared out of thin air in front of everyone. It was an old man in a white robe. The powerful aura was coming from this old man. The 6th Grand Elder. There was no need for him to repeat himself. Chu-Mu took out the sword sect spiritual seal again. As soon as the sword sect spiritual seal appeared in Chu-Mu's hand, it trembled and emitted a milky white light. The 6th Grand Elder's spiritual power poured out and covered the sword sect spiritual seal in Chu-Mu's hand. He immediately looked excited. It's the real sword sect spiritual seal. The spiritual seal has chosen its master. The 6th Grand Elder said happily. Elder Yun-Feng, who was beside him, was full of smiles. Yun-He's expression was complicated. The 6th Grand Elder looked at Chu-Mu with eyes full of excitement. Then he disappeared with a whoosh and summoned the other Grand Elders. Chu-Mu put away the sword sect spiritual seal. The Grand Elders had not appeared yet, but a person came that surprised everyone. Yun-Feng, how dare you come here again? Yun-Yi's cold eyes fell on Yun-Feng's face. Fu Wensheng is dead. Now I'll give you a chance to surrender to me. Yun-Yi, you won't be able to laugh soon, Yun-Feng said with a cold smile. Yun-He, take Yun-Feng down. Yun-Yi looked at Yun-He and scolded. Yun-He frowned slightly. A trace of impatience flashed in his eyes, but he ignored Yun-Yi. Yun-Yi's face was gloomy. His gaze fell on Chu-Mu. Who are you? At this moment, Yun-Yi gave off the feeling of a mad dog that would bite anyone it caught. Chu-Mu did not answer. He would not expose the sword sect spiritual seal. Men, take them down. Yun-Yi was angry. With a wave of his hand, the Nirvana Realm swordsman standing behind him immediately moved and surrounded Chu-Mu and the others. I advise you not to act rashly because the Grand Elders will be here soon, Yun-Feng said calmly, not caring at all about being surrounded. That's good. I'll take you down and let the Supreme Elders decide. Yun Xiao was very surprised that the Supreme Elders would appear, but he still said it. Give it a try then. As he spoke, Yun Feng placed his sword light horizontally in front of him. The cold sword light flowed like water, and a desolate aura instantly filled the entire hall. Yun He thought for a moment and also pulled out his sword. He stood on the other side of Chu Mu and used his actions to express his position. He was not stupid. Chu Mu's sword sect spirit seal had been confirmed by the sixth Supreme Elder, and it was real. In that case, Chu Mu would most likely become the sect master, and if he did not stand on the sect master's side at this time, he would be looking for trouble for himself, not to mention that his original intention was for the development of the real sword sect. Yun He, what do you mean by this? Yun He was stunned and became even angrier. He did not understand what had happened. Yun Feng, who had fled for his life, had actually appeared here, and Yun He, who belonged to his faction, had actually drawn his sword against him. When the Grand Elders arrive, you will understand. Yun He said coldly. Good, good, good. Yun He was even angrier now. He pulled out his sword, and a tyrannical aura surged. It belonged to the peak of the eighth sky of Nirvana realm, and poured out. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his long robe fluttered. The aura overflowed, and the air was cut, making swishing sounds. It had to be said that judging from the aura that was emitted, Yun Yi's strength was very strong, and his attainments in swordsmanship were probably not low. A faint silver light appeared on the sword in Yun Yi's hand. It was sword energy, but it was only at the first level. From this point of view, Yun Yi was a swordsman. Swords were drawn, and a desolate aura filled the surroundings, making people tremble. Yun Feng and Yun He both looked serious. They knew Yun Yi's strength. He was very strong, and he had mastered sword energy. He was not someone they could fight against. Even if the two of them joined forces, they would not be Yun Yi's opponent at all. Now, they could only hope that the Grand Elders would arrive soon. Yun Yi walked over step by step, bringing great pressure to Yun He and Yun Feng. The two of them stood in front of Chu Mu, ready to resist Yun Yi. Although they knew that they were not Yun Yi's opponent, it should not be difficult to delay him for a while. Sword light flashed, and Yun Yi launched an attack. His tyrannical swordsmanship was mighty, and Yun Feng and Yun He also quickly displayed their swordsmanship to resist Yun Yi's swordsmanship. With one sword, the two of them were forced back a little. Capture him. Yun Yi saw Yun Feng and Yun He protecting Chu Mu, and immediately ordered the others. Immediately, the swordsmen of the middle level of Nirvana realm attacked Chu Mu, intending to capture Chu Mu. Yun Feng and Yun He's faces changed. They wanted to repel those people, but Yun Yi attacked again, making it impossible for Yun Feng and Yun He to separate. At this moment, Chu Mu struck out with his sword light. It was as if the lightning in the sky had cut off the thunder. Under the sword, the attacking swordsmen of the middle level of Nirvana realm were unable to resist and were all sent flying. In terms of cultivation, these people were not inferior to Chu Mu, and were even above Chu Mu. But in terms of strength, they were far from being comparable. This scene immediately made Yun Yi stop, and shocked Yun Feng and Yun He. Who are you? Yun Yi's eyes narrowed, and he asked in a low voice. A cultivator of the early level of Nirvana realm was able to repel several people of higher cultivation with one sword. This did not make sense. Don't worry, you will know soon, Chu Mu said lightly. Yun Feng and Yun He were overjoyed. They had never thought that the sect leader who had been recognized by the sword sect spirit seal, although his cultivation was not very high, his strength was amazing. It was no problem for him to fight above his level. The more outstanding the sect leader was, the more advantageous it was for the true sword sect. Yun Yi's face became even gloomier. He could kill Yun Feng and Yun He, but it would take time. The stranger was very strong, and it seemed difficult for his disciples to deal with him. For a moment there was a stalemate. At that moment, powerful auras appeared one after another, startling everyone. Following that, 7 figures appeared one after another, and there were 7 of them. Supreme Elders. Yun-Yi was shocked. He had heard that the Supreme Elders would appear, but he did not expect there to be 7 of them. He was completely confused. Yun-Feng greets the 7 Supreme Elders. Yun-He greets the 7 Supreme Elders. Where is the Sword Sect Spirit Seal? The first Supreme Elder spoke first, and his tone was a little excited. Yun-Yi was stunned. The Sword Sect Spirit Seal? At this moment, Chu-Mu took out the Sword Sect Spirit Seal again, and it also emitted a milky white light. The 7 Supreme Elders immediately surrounded Chu-Mu. They all stared at the Sword Sect Spirit Seal in Chu-Mu's hand, and their expressions became more and more excited. Good, good, good. The Spirit Seal really chooses its master. Great. After hundreds of years, our true Sword Sect has a new sect leader. The Supreme Elder's words and the ball of light in Chu-Mu's hand shocked Yun-Yi and his disciples. Impossible. How could the Sword Sect Spirit Seal be in the hands of a stranger? It must be fake. Yun-Yi went crazy. He had tried all kinds of methods but could not get the Sword Sect Spirit Seal, and it was in the hands of a stranger. He directly attacked Chu-Mu. The sword light was sharp and fierce, and it looked like he wanted to kill Chu-Mu. However, the Supreme Elders were here, and he could not be presumptuous. With a bang, Yun-Yi flew out at an even faster speed. He spat out blood and landed dozens of meters away, unable to get up for a while. Take him down, a Taishang elder ordered. Yun-Fenghe moved and captured the injured Yun-Shao. The situation changed very quickly, and Yun-Yi became a prisoner in an instant. After the confirmation of the 7 Supreme Elders, it was indeed the Sword Sect Spirit Seal, and Chu-Mu had indeed made the Sword Sect Spirit Seal react and choose its master. In other words, from now on, Chu-Mu was the sect leader of the true Sword Sect. However, the status of the 7 Supreme Elders was extraordinary, and they were not inferior to the sect leader. Therefore, they did not need to kneel to Chu-Mu. Yun-Yi was first taken away and locked up. Yun-Feng quickly left to bring Li Shao and the other disciples back. Yun-He also took care of the other disciples in the true Sword Sect. The whole sect was mobilized because the emergence of a new sect leader was a big event. However, this was a matter of the true Sword Sect, so the true Sword Sect did not publicize it with great fanfare. They only held a celebration within the sect, and almost all the disciples of the true Sword Sect were present. In the sect celebration, Chu-Mu sat on the seat of the sect leader. As for the 7 Supreme Elders, they were hidden behind the scenes and did not appear in front of the public. Below them were the 2 Supreme Elders, Yun-Feng and Yun-He. Speaking of which, the true Sword Sect originally had a vice-sect leader and 4 Supreme Elders. Now that the vice-sect leader was dead, the 4th Supreme Elder was also dead, and the 1st Supreme Elder Yun-Yi was imprisoned. Only the 2nd Supreme Elder Yun-Feng and the 3rd Supreme Elder Yun-He were left. As for the disciples of the true Sword Sect, many of them had died in this rebellion. The number of people that were not very prosperous to begin with had decreased by a large amount. The disciples were divided into 4 levels. The lowest were the registered disciples, followed by the official disciples, followed by the elite disciples, and the highest were the core disciples. Among them, the registered disciples had the lowest status and could not be considered as the official disciples of the true Sword Sect. Therefore, there were more of them, and their cultivation was below the origin realm. Because of their lowest status, they could not be considered as the official disciples of the true Sword Sect. Therefore, they were not qualified to participate in this sect celebration. The official disciples' cultivation was at the origin realm, and they had to be proficient in at least one yellow-level sword technique. The sword techniques in the Deep Blue world were divided into low-level, mid-level, and high-level. Above that were yellow-level, profound-level, earth-level, and heaven-level. The yellow-level, profound-level, earth level, and heaven level were the same as the ancient god realm's 4 major human starfield. The deep blue world's sword techniques were not as prosperous. Therefore, the yellow level, profound level, earth level, and heaven level sword techniques could not be compared to the 4 major human starfield. The elite disciples' cultivation was at the god-congealing realm, and they had to be proficient in at least 2 yellow-level sword techniques and 1 profound-level sword technique. The core disciples' cultivation was at the nirvana realm, and they had to be proficient in at least 4 yellow-level sword techniques, 2 profound-level sword techniques, and 1 earth-level sword technique. Currently, there were not many core disciples in the true sword sect. There were only 26 of them left. There were more elite disciples, about 100 of them, and over 300 official disciples. Most of them had died in this rebellion, which was a sad thing. Bring Yun-Yi here. At the end of the celebration, Chu-Mu gave the order to start dealing with Yun-Yi. It was because of his rebellion that a large number of the true sword sect disciples had died. Chapter 1336. Although the true sword sect had declined, it was once a glorious and powerful sect. There were strict branches within it. Sect Master's Peak, Punishment Hall, Wind Heart Hall, Tao Teaching Peak, Sword Crafting Valley, Treasure Pill Pavilion, and so on. There were also some exclusive peaks for elite disciples, as well as official disciples. As for the in-name disciples, they were all arranged in a huge valley at the foot of the ancient Beast Mountain. The third Elder Yun-He was the Punishment Elder of Punishment Hall, while the second Elder Yun-Feng was the Elder Feng Xian of the Wind Heart Hall. As for the great Elder Yun-Yi, he was previously in charge of the Tao Teaching Peak. The dead fourth Elder was in charge of the Sword Crafting Valley. As for the Treasure Pill Pavilion, there was currently no pavilion master. Great Elder Yun-Yi's betrayal had led to the deaths of many disciples of the true sword sect, as well as the deaths of the fourth Elder and the Vice Sect Master. He had committed a heinous crime, and according to the laws of the true sword sect, he should be sentenced to death. Under the gazes of Chu-Mu and the 7 Supreme Elders, in front of Elder Yun-Feng and all the true sword sect disciples, the Punishment Elder, who was also the second elder of the sect, Yun-He, personally attacked. The sword aura sliced through the clouds. The sword cheese death by 1,000 cuts was done while the person was still conscious. That kind of pain was unimaginable. Yun-Yi's screams were endless. The whole process lasted for a full hour before it ended. After it ended, Yun-Yi died. There was a look of relief on his face. Chu-Mu was secretly speechless. The other disciples all had solemn expressions and even fear. This made everyone even more aware that they must not violate the sect rules, or else their fates would be very miserable. There were many things waiting to be done. The current true sword sect had experienced a rebellion and suffered heavy losses. Fortunately, the rebellion had ended here, and the true sword sect had also produced a true sect master, no longer a headless dragon. At the beginning, although Chu-Mu said he wouldn't spend much time on the management of the sect, there were many things waiting to be done. Since he was the sect master, he more or less had to put in some effort. It was natural for him to be in his position and manage the affairs of the sect. However, management wasn't Chu-Mu's forte. He had to ask the 7 Supreme Elders for guidance. A sect master only appeared every few hundred years, and although this sect master's cultivation wasn't high, his talent and potential were shocking. The 7 Supreme Elders didn't go into seclusion for the time being. Instead, they stayed behind to manage the sect's affairs and give advice. After several discussions with the 7 Supreme Elders, they finally made a temporary decision. Yun-He was still in charge of the Punishment Hall, Yun-Feng was still in charge of the Wind Heart Hall, and as for the Tao Teaching Summit, it was temporarily under the control of the 7th Great Elder. The Sword Crafting Valley was temporarily under the control of the 5th Great Elder, and the Treasure Pill Pavilion was temporarily under the control of the 3rd Great Elder. The other 4 Grand Elders had nothing to do for the time being and planned to go into seclusion again. I wonder if the Supreme Elders have heard of the 18 Divine Pearls? Chumu asked. 18 Divine Pearls? The 4 Grand Elders pondered for a moment before shaking their heads. Chumu couldn't help feeling a bit disappointed. The True Sword Sect's 7 Grand Elders had the highest cultivation base at the 6th heaven stage, while the lowest was at the 2nd heaven stage. Since they didn't know, Chumu didn't know where to start looking. Regarding this, you can ask Third Brother. He is the most knowledgeable among the 7 of us. The first Supreme Elder said. The 4 Grand Elders left to go into seclusion, while Chumu went to find the 3rd Supreme Elder to ask about the 18 Divine Pearls. 18 Divine Pearls. The 3rd Supreme Elder fell into deep thought, as if he was recalling something. He had lived for hundreds of years, and with his personality and hobbies, he had seen a lot of things and had grasped a lot of knowledge. After a long while, the 3rd Supreme Elder said, I seem to have heard of the 18 Divine Pearls. I forgot where I heard of it. Elder, do you still remember the content? Chumu was slightly excited. The 18 Divine Pearls are related to the secrets of this world. The 3rd Supreme Elder said, however, it has been dozens of years, so I can't remember the specific content right now. Let me take some time to think about it before telling the sect master. Thank you, Elder, Chumu said. At this point, the True Sword sect could be considered to have stabilized. Although they had a sect master, it was extremely difficult for them to develop or even regain their glory. Without sufficient time and resources, it was impossible to do so. Fortunately, the presence of the sect master was equivalent to having a spiritual symbol, which was more cohesive. The True Sword sect was revitalized. Within the True Sword sect, there were all kinds of rumors about the new sect master. What they were most concerned about was the strength of the new sect master. After all, this was a world where the strong were respected. If one's strength was not enough, it would be difficult to convince people from the bottom of their hearts with the title of sect master. That day, under Yun Yi's order, the few mid-level Nirvana disciples who attacked Chumu were all core disciples, and they were even ranked in the top 10. According to them, they were defeated by the sect master with a single sword strike. Other than being surprised, they were even more curious about the sect master's strength. With the cultivation of the 4th sky of Nirvana realm, he was able to defeat the siege of several mid-level Nirvana realm martial artists with a single sword strike. This strength was very powerful. However, after all, they had only heard about it and had not seen it with their own eyes. Many people still had doubts. Even those who had personally experienced it were not so sure. After all, they had only attacked once, and it was not their full strength. Chumu did not know what the disciples were thinking. Even if he knew, he would not purposely take action to prove anything. He ordered Elder Yunfeng's Wind Heart Hall to collect information related to the 18 Divine Pearls. For example, the law enforcement disciples of the Punishment Hall were selected from the core disciples, elite disciples, and official disciples. They were fair, and those who were strong had a chance to be selected. The disciples of the Wind Heart Hall were also selected from the 3 great disciples. However, the requirements were that they were nimble, intelligent, and fast. The Tao Teaching Peak was the place where cultivation techniques and sword techniques were taught. The existence of the Sword Crafting Valley was to forge swords and forge swords. On one hand, it was to supply the True Sword sect, and on the other hand, it was to sell them to the outside world to obtain the daily expenses of the sect. After all, there were a lot of disciples, and they could not let these disciples grow their own vegetables and so on. It was the same for the Treasure Pill Pavilion. In theory, a portion of the pills refined were for the sect's needs, while the other portion would be sold to the outside world. Of course, the swords and pills that the sect needed were not obtained for free, and they required certain conditions. Relatively speaking, the Sword Crafting Valley was much more prosperous than the Treasure Pill Pavilion. The True Sword sect was actually not good at alchemy, the quality of the pills was usually not high, and the level of the alchemist was also relatively low. The supply of pills could not be satisfied by just the sect, let alone be sold to the outside world. On the other hand, the quality of the swords in the sword crafting valley was not bad, and the production was not bad. Chu Mu had a detailed understanding of the various aspects of the true sword sect, and could not help but shake his head. The sale of a portion of the swords in the sword crafting valley was the largest source of income for the true sword sect. Other than that, there was not much other income. With just this kind of income, it would be a little difficult to maintain the expenses of a sect, let alone develop it. Rubbing his temples, Chu Mu could not help but feel a headache coming on. His perception was extremely strong, and it was not difficult for him to comprehend cultivation techniques, sword techniques, and so on. However, it was a headache for him to manage the sect and think about how to develop it. No matter what, the most important thing now was to first solve the source of income. Without enough income, it would be difficult to develop. Looks like I'll start with the swords and pills first, Chu Mu thought. If the swords and pills were done well, they would be able to make a huge profit. Right now, the sword crafting valley was temporarily under the charge of the 5th Supreme Elder. In terms of sword forging, he had pretty good attainments, and in fact, a long time ago, he had also held the position of Sword Crafting Valley's Sword Crafting Elder. As for the 3rd Supreme Elder, who was temporarily in charge of the Treasure Pill Pavilion, although he had never been an elder of the Treasure Pill Pavilion, he was knowledgeable and involved in all aspects. In terms of pills, he had some attainments, and was currently qualified to be the Treasure Pill Pavilion's Treasure Pill Elder. Chu Mu was also at ease as he handed over the Sword Crafting Valley and the Treasure Pill Pavilion to the 2 very high elders. He only gave them some instructions and allowed them to develop freely, so as to earn more benefits for the sect. However, it was impossible for the very high elder to hold the position for a long time. It was only temporary, and he still needed to nurture or find a suitable candidate. This was another problem. In addition, the External Affairs Hall, which was in charge of external affairs, had not been completed. They lacked personnel and elders. The current True Sword sect did not need the External Affairs Hall for the time being, but if they wanted to develop, the External Affairs Hall was indispensable. Only after coming into contact with it did Chu Mu understand that there were too many things that needed to be considered. There were too many twists and turns. It was not easy to be a sect master, it was even harder to be a qualified sect master, and it was even harder to be an outstanding sect master. Chu Mu returned to his room after putting down this troublesome matter for the time being. As the sect master of the True Sword sect, he naturally had his own residence. It was located at the top of the sect master's peak in the ancient Beast Mountain. Currently, there was no one in charge of Chu Mu's daily life. Sitting on a chair in the bedroom, Chu Mu took out the sword sect spirit seal. As the symbol of his identity as the sect master of the True Sword sect, it was defined as something that contained a great secret. Chu Mu was wondering if he could unravel the secret within. It was said that the secret contained within the sword sect spirit seal had been unraveled by many generations of sect masters, but no one had been able to unravel it. He wondered if Chu Mu could be the first. The moment the sword sect spirit seal appeared, it immediately emitted a milky white light. Chu Mu placed the sword sect spirit seal on his palm and stared at it without blinking, as if he wanted to see through the sword sect spirit seal. From the moment he obtained the sword sect spirit seal until now, he had finally calmed down and carefully examined it. His sharp gaze pierced through the milky white light and saw the spirit seal itself. However, he was unable to see through it. It was a complete entity without any gap. He released the power of his divine sense, which enveloped the sword sect spirit seal through the milky white light. He carefully examined it, but he found nothing. However, Chu Mu did not give up. He was determined to unravel the secret contained within the sword sect spirit seal. Perhaps this secret was related to the world spirit. Chapter 1337. The power of spiritual sense, sword force, the power of laws, and so on. Chu Mu tried them one by one. Suddenly, the sword sect spirit seal trembled, and the milky white light instantly became incomparably dense, like a scorching sun. The light directly covered Chu Mu. When he reacted, Chu Mu found himself in an unknown place, surrounded by a vast expanse of whiteness. Looking around, all he saw was a vast expanse of whiteness. He tried to spread out his spiritual sense, but found that there was no spiritual sense. At this moment, the white haze in the surroundings quickly receded, revealing the greenish-gray ground. It was made of stone slabs. The white haze continued to recede, revealing more and more scenery. There were fake mountains, pavilions, lakes, flowers. This was a courtyard, a very large courtyard. However, Chu Mu felt that this courtyard had a simple and unadorned aura, as if it was a courtyard from a very, very long time ago. In the entire large courtyard, there was no one besides him. Suddenly, Chu Mu was shocked. There was an extra person in the empty pavilion. Chu Mu thought it was an illusion and rubbed his eyes. There was indeed an extra person. The white robe fluttered, and there was an indescribable demeanor. When Chu Mu stared at the white-robed man, the white-robed man seemed to feel it and slowly turned his head. Chu Mu's body suddenly trembled, and his pupils shrank. He didn't know why it was like this. It was a natural reaction. The white-robed man's appearance was indescribable. It was as if he could see clearly at a glance, but it was also very blurry. It was as if there was a mysterious power that blocked Chu Mu's vision, making him unable to remember. "What's your name?" The white-robed man stood up and walked step by step towards Chu Mu. His voice was calm, but it contained a unique magic. "Chu Mu." Chu Mu didn't think at all and directly answered. Then he was shocked to find that things seemed to be out of control, and became more vigilant. "Don't worry, I have no ill intentions towards you." The white-clothed man stopped and stood at the exit of the pavilion. He looked at Chu Mu and said, "It has been a long time since anyone has come here. Who are you?" Although the other party said so, Chu Mu still did not let his guard down. Instead, he asked back. "You can call me by Ling." The white-robed man's tone was still unhurried. "What's your question? Ask away. Who are you? Where is this place? Why am I here?" Chu Mu asked 3 questions in a row. "This is the interior of the Sword Sect's spiritual seal, and I am the spiritual seal's spirit. As for why you are here, you should know." A smile appeared on Bai Ling's face. The interior of the Sword Sect's spirit seal. Chu Mu was immediately stunned. "So, I've cracked the secret of the spirit seal?" "No, you've only just discovered the secret of the spiritual seal. You haven't solved it yet," Bai Ling replied. The mysterious spiritual seal's spirit seal, Bai Ling, seemed to be very patient. It seemed that he had not talked to anyone for a long time. Therefore, he would give answers to most of Chu Mu's questions. Chu Mu gradually understood the current situation through the conversation. For example, he did not enter this place with his real body, but with the power of his divine thought. Therefore, he could not release the power of his divine thought. As for why he entered this place, it was because he had mastered sword force to a certain extent. In addition, he had a stronger soul than ordinary people. He had met all the requirements to be qualified to crack the secret of the Sword Sect's spiritual seal. Chu Mu had mastered level 7 sword force. His soul was far stronger than other swordsmen of the same level. It could be said that even some sword saints of the Eternal Realm might not be stronger than Chu Mu's soul. Under all these conditions and restrictions, the secret of the Sword Sect's spiritual seal was difficult to crack. Over time it became a legend. It was difficult enough to make the Sword Sect's spiritual seal choose its master. The difficulty of cracking the secret was 10 times or 100 times more difficult than choosing a master. That was why Bai Ling said that no one had entered this place for a long time. It was also because no one had entered this place for a long time that they chatted so much. Senior Bai Ling, was the sword sect's spiritual seal really left behind by the sword god? Chu Mu, who was already sitting in the pavilion with Bai Ling, asked another question. What do you think? Bai Ling's face revealed a hint of ridicule. I don't know, Chu Mu said. You will know in the future. Bai Ling did not answer directly, so Chu Mu could not be sure. In front of Bai Ling, he always felt like a junior. He had never felt this way even when facing the Grand Hall Master of the Sword God Hall. Therefore, in front of Bai Ling, Chu Mu would unconsciously feel restrained. It was as if he had returned to the time when he was still a child and asked his master for advice. There was no sense of abruptness. According to the rules set by Master, you must pass the test to truly unlock the secret of the sword sect's spiritual seal, Bai Ling said as the topic gradually shifted to the secret of the sword sect's spiritual seal. Senior Bai Ling, what test is it? Chu Mu was curious. Do you want to start the test now? Bai Ling did not answer. Instead, she asked a question. Okay. Chu Mu did not hesitate at all. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Ling disappeared. Immediately after, the pavilion, fake mountains, flowers, and so on also rapidly disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of white. Just as Chu Mu was feeling surprised, a figure appeared in the vast expanse of white before him. From a blur, it walked over step by step, slowly becoming clear. The surrounding scenery changed, and there were thousands of willow trees. It was a white-clothed person. At first glance, Chu Mu thought it was Bai Ling, but after a second glance, he discovered that it was not Bai Ling. It just looked a little like Bai Ling. I am the challenger of the first test. If you defeat me, you can enter the second test, the white-clothed person who looked a little like Bai Ling said coldly with a sharp gaze. He drew his sword and pointed the tip of the sword. Chu Mu's mind moved, and a sword appeared in his hand. The white-clothed person's hand trembled, and the sharp sword turned into many sword light, attacking from all directions. How exquisite! Chu Mu was shocked. The opponent's sword had an indescribable exquisiteness, making him feel that there was nowhere to dodge. Even dealing with it was difficult. Using all his strength, he could only barely dodge it. Just as Chu Mu was about to swing his sword to counterattack, the white-clothed person's sword came again. This time, the sword came at him horizontally, but it was hard to find, and he could not determine where it would land. Just as he was about to swing his sword, he could barely keep up and block. Chu Mu quickly retreated, increasing the distance between them. This was the first time he had been so clearly suppressed in a battle of swordsmanship. The white-clothed person's sword style was light and graceful. Every sword seemed weak, but it was actually very powerful, and could kill people without them knowing. Under the white-clothed person's sword, Chu Mu was more on the defensive than on the offensive. With a thought, a sword appeared in Chu Mu's left hand, and he used the dual sword technique. His strength multiplied, and he gradually recovered from the disadvantage, and fought fiercely with the white-clothed person. Chu Mu used all his skills, and used the dual sword technique to the extreme, but he still could not do anything to the white-clothed person. No matter how violent Chu Mu's attacks were, the white-clothed person's sword was always light and graceful. As he waved his sword, he dissolved Chu Mu's attacks one by one. His casual counterattacks always made Chu Mu have to deal with it with all his strength. Chu Mu had not experienced this kind of feeling for a long time, and it was often he who brought it to others. Chu Mu's learning ability was very strong, and there was no doubt about it. In the sword battle with the white-clothed person, Chu Mu slowly absorbed his opponent's strengths, and slowly integrated them into his own sword style, making his sword style more exquisite. At the same time, his swordsmanship attainments also improved little by little without him noticing. In here, other than sword style, all other forces could not be used, and the same was true for his opponent. It could be said that this was a pure sword battle, a battle of life and death. The white-clothed person's swordsmanship was light and graceful to the extreme, and it was unimaginably exquisite. Chu Mu fought with all his might with the dual sword technique, but he still could not gain the upper hand. Suddenly, the white-clothed person stabbed his sword, and Chu Mu dodged with all his strength. The sword light suddenly flashed and disappeared in front of his eyes. Chu Mu only felt pain in his throat, and the sword pierced through. His vision quickly darkened. Startled, Chu Mu woke up and broke out in a cold sweat. He felt that he had a dream. In the dream, he was fighting with a white-clothed person whose swordsmanship was indescribably superb. He used the dual sword technique, and after an intense battle, he was killed by his opponent's sword. The feeling of being pierced through by a sword was very clear in his memory. The sword sex spirit seal was still emitting a milky white light, but it was a normal milky white light. After looking at it a few times, Chu Mu put the sword sex spirit seal into his portable space, closed his eyes, and recalled everything that had just happened. It was like a dream, but it was not a dream. It really happened. In other words, Chu Mu had come into contact with the great secret contained in the sword sect spirit seal. As for what the secret was, it was still unclear because he had not passed the test. Only after passing the test would he know the great secret contained in the sword sect spirit seal. However, he did not know how many tests there were. However, it was too early to think about this. He could not even pass the first test. Thinking of this, Chu Mu's emotions were very complicated. He felt disappointed, excited, and excited. He felt disappointed because he had met an opponent who was not only not inferior to him in terms of swordsmanship, but was even much stronger than him. He felt excited because someone was much stronger than him in terms of swordsmanship. This meant that he could continue to improve in terms of swordsmanship. There was nothing that excited him more than this, because this was his pursuit, his lifelong pursuit. Entering the sword sex spirit seal was not a physical entry, but a virtual entry with his divine sense. He could only use swordsmanship, so the test should also be swordsmanship. Chu Mu suddenly wanted to enter and try again. However, he temporarily suppressed this thought because he needed some time to digest what he had gained from the battle with the white-clothed person. After a period of time, Chu Mu successfully absorbed what he had gained, and to a certain extent, he had improved his attainments in swordsmanship. Chu Mu once again took out the sword sect spirit seal, and just like before, he entered the sword sect spirit seal and began the test. Chapter 1338. In the sect master's room, Chu Mu sat on a chair. His body was straight and his back was like a sword. His eyes were tightly shut, and his body was surrounded by ripples of aura that undulated like a tide. His body trembled, and the fluctuating aura dissipated. He opened his eyes, which were a little tired, but also contained a trace of excitement. He had failed again. By now, Chu Mu had already entered the inner world of the sword sex spirit seal. He had fought many times with the first trial's examinees, and lost every time. It could be said that he had lost again, and he would never admit defeat. Except for the first battle, when Chu Mu had used the dual sword technique, he had only used one sword in the subsequent battles. Chu Mu thought that if he could pass the test with a single sword, then using the dual sword technique, his strength would be even stronger. However, if he used the dual sword technique to pass the test and switched to a single sword, his strength would decrease. Simply put, one sword was the benchmark of strength, while the dual sword technique was an extension of strength. Chu Mu could not abandon the benchmark, which was his foundation. In the first stage, the examinee's sword movements were extremely light. Every strike was as light as a feather, as if they didn't use any strength, but in reality, they all contained terrifying power. Fighting with a single sword, Chu Mu often wouldn't be able to last long before being killed. However, the good thing was that every time he fought and every time he was killed, Chu Mu would be able to gain a bit. Absorbing the gains into his own before entering, he would often be able to last longer. The previous time, he could fight with the first trials examinees for 100 moves before being defeated. Compared to before, he had improved greatly. He felt that his swordsmanship realm seemed to be about to break through again. The unity of man and sword was both a level of power control and a realm of swordsmanship. Many years ago, after Chu Mu had reached the unity of man and sword realm, as he cultivated, fought, and comprehended, he improved little by little. From the beginner's level to the small success level, and then to the Deshang level. It seemed like a small improvement, but only he knew how difficult it was. It was too difficult, too difficult. The unity of man and sword was a realm that had trapped countless experts. Even sword saints of the Aeon realm were still stuck at the unity of man and sword level. Chu Mu was at the fourth sky of Nirvana realm, but his swordsmanship had reached the union of man and sword. Throughout history there were very few people like Deshang. The higher the level of swordsmanship, the harder it was to improve. Chu Mu had been trapped in the Deshang realm of one with the sword for several years. This kind of realm could only be experienced and comprehended by oneself, and could not be taught by word of mouth. That was why it was so difficult to improve. This time, after deciphering the secret of the sword sex spirit seal and dueling with the white-robed man in a sword technique to the death, he managed to obtain such a fortuitous encounter with his monstrous comprehension ability. The realm of one with the sword was progressing towards perfection. Chu Mu didn't know what the next realm was. The unknown made people yearn for it more, and there were more twists and turns. Perhaps in the age of gods there were many experts who had reached the union of man and sword level, but in the present there were not many. Ever since there was hope of deciphering the secret of the sword sex spirit seal, Chu Mu basically did not appear. He was immersed in it wholeheartedly. After another battle and another failure, Chu Mu suddenly felt a sense of irritation. Although he was extremely tenacious and would never back down despite repeated defeats, his repeated failures would still make him feel depressed. Even though he would improve after each failure, the path of cultivation was about having a balance between tension and relaxation. Therefore, Chu Mu decided to temporarily go out for a walk to relieve his boredom and take a look at the true sword sect. At the very least, he wouldn't be so negligent in his duties. At present, the true sword sect did not have many disciples. Because of the rebellion, most of them had been lost, causing the overall strength of the true sword sect to drop significantly. As for the 7 saint stage great elders, under normal circumstances, they would not make a move. After all, they were the true sword sect's last resort. They were the true sword sect's greatest trump card. They would not make a move unless the sect was in a critical situation. A Saint Realm expert was completely above the Nirvana realm. It was a powerful existence that had transcended the level of human life. The destruction caused by their attacks was extremely terrifying. They belonged to the level of deterrence, especially a sword saint who had grasped the power of the sword. Once his sword technique was used, it could break mountains and rivers. Apart from the above reasons, there was another very important reason, which was what the great elders had told Chu Mu before. The reason why the true sword sect had fallen to such a state was because they had a powerful enemy, a powerful opposing force. In fact, the true sword sect's original location was not on the ancient Beast Mountain at all. The original location was many times larger than the ancient Beast Mountain. Under the pressure of a powerful enemy, the true sword sect suffered heavy losses, forcing them to retreat. At that time, the 7 great elders were nowhere near as powerful as they were now. Back then, there were even a few who had not reached Saint Great Elders. The reason why they hid behind the scenes and did not dare to take action carelessly was also out of fear. They were not sure whether the enemy would find out if they took action, and whether the enemy would try to kill them all if they found out. If a Saint Great Elder took action, it would definitely attract the attention of other saints. A battle between saints like this was no small matter. It was fine if they did not take action, but once they did, it would be earth-shattering. It would be widely known. Under various fears, the 7 great elders became the greatest hidden force. The true sword sect had lost many disciples, so their strength had plummeted. They were in urgent need of development. The ancient Beast Mountain was within the Kanglan Empire. It was over 5,000 meters tall, and it was one of the tallest mountains in the empire. From afar, the continuous ancient Beast Mountain looked like an ancient, crouching beast, which seemed to be how it got its name. Inside the ancient Beast Mountain, there were flowers, plants, rocks, and spirit beasts. Among them, there were also some mines, spirit medicines, and so on. The True Sword sect had its own spirit medicine field, and the spirit medicine needed by the Treasure Dan Pavilion could often be picked from the spirit medicine field. As for the spirit medicine in the mountains, the disciples of the True Sword sect could find it themselves. After finding it, they could use it themselves or give it to the True Sword sect in exchange for sect contribution points. As for the metal ores that the sword crafting valley needed, they could not be nurtured by themselves, and were usually nurtured by the heavens and the earth. Fortunately, the ancient Beast Mountain was very big, and after many years, there were quite a few mineral veins that had naturally grown and formed. However, some of the mineral veins were hidden very deeply, and even the experts of the 10,000 Ancient Saints stage might not be able to detect them. There were a total of 3 mineral veins in the True Sword sect. 2 of them were small mineral veins that produced tungsten iron ore and purple copper ore, and 1 was a medium-sized mineral vein that produced red cloud steel Oregon. Among them, the red cloud steel ore was discovered a few years ago and was in the initial mining stage. The person in charge of mining the ore was naturally an honorary disciple. Official disciples could also apply for mining in order to obtain sect contributions, while a small portion of elite disciples and core disciples would take turns to guard the ore vein and deal with various matters, such as the attacks of spirit beasts and so on. Other than the attacks of spirit beasts, there could also be incidents of cultivators stealing ores. However, this was the first time such a brazen invasion had occurred. If you have the guts to come, why hide? The core disciple, Ma Jingtao, pointed his sword at the group of masked men in black and said sternly. Behind Ma Jingtao was a group of elite disciples of the divine condensation realm. There were a total of 36 of them, and all of them pulled out their swords and pointed them forward. There were even more masked men in black, almost 100 of them. Most of them were of the divine condensation realm, and 3 of them were of the nirvana realm. There was a great disparity in numbers, but Ma Jingtao had already ordered the official disciples to quickly return to the sect and ask for reinforcements, so what he needed to do was to stall for time as much as possible until the sect's reinforcements arrived. As for the honorary disciples, they had all been sent away to avoid unnecessary casualties. Unfortunately, the other party did not give them the chance to stall for time. Kill! The leader of the masked men waved his hand and only said a single word. Almost 100 masked men in black immediately split up. Some of them drew their swords and charged over, while others waved their hands and formed seals to cast spells. Form the formation. Ma Jingtao's expression changed as he hurriedly gave the order. Immediately, 36 sword cultivators of the divine condensation realm quickly moved and formed a sword formation. It was the powerful sword formation of the True Sword sect, the 36 Heavenly Dipper sword formation. The 36 Heavenly Dipper sword formation combined both attack and defense. It gathered the power of 36 sword cultivators into one and was extremely powerful. Normal Nirvana realm cultivators would not be able to fight against it. Ma Jingtao was of the 4th heavenly layer of the Nirvana realm. His sword skills were profound, and he was very powerful. He was not afraid of the masked men in black, because the strongest of the masked men in black had the same cultivation as him. The other 2 were only of the 3rd heavenly layer of the Nirvana realm. Ma Jingtao used his own strength to stall the 3 of them, while the 36 sword cultivators formed the Heavenly Dipper sword formation to resist the 100 masked men in black. An intense battle unfolded. Ma Jingtao used all his strength to fight 1 against 3, but he was at a disadvantage. The 36 sword cultivators formed the Heavenly Dipper sword formation to resist the encirclement of the 100 masked men in black. For a moment, they were unable to counterattack and could only defend. Although the 36 Heavenly Dipper sword formation was powerful, the 36 sword cultivators had not grasped its essence and could only use a portion of its power. Quicksand Gang, I knew it was you. You actually dare to covet the minds of our true sword sect. Aren't you afraid of being annihilated? Ma Jingtao resisted with difficulty, but he also recognized the other party's identity, so he threatened them. Hee, does the current true sword sect have the strength to do so? The masked man in black sneered. His words had undoubtedly acknowledged their identity. Don't put up a pointless resistance. Surrender as soon as possible. Otherwise, once they deal with the people in the other 2 mines, it will be the time of your death. Ma Jingtao's face suddenly changed drastically. At the same time, the other 2 small mines of the True Sword sect were attacked by 2 groups of masked men in black. The battle unfolded in 3 places. The battle in the other 2 small mines ended very quickly. The people guarding the small mines were weaker, while the masked men in black were not weak at all. After the battle ended, the 2 groups of masked men in black quickly moved, heading towards the mine. The faces of Ma Jingtao and the others changed drastically. They were surrounded from 3 sides. Their chances of escaping were slim. Chapter 1339. Riding the sword light, he soared in the sky, wandering freely without restraint. His body and mind were broad. The blue sky was like a huge jewel. It was within reach, but it was also boundless. Below, there were lofty mountains and lush trees, full of vitality. Taking a deep breath, he could smell the fragrance of the plants and the freshness of the sky. It was so wide and so beautiful. It made Chu Mu's gloominess vanish. Suddenly, he frowned slightly. He felt the chaotic killing intent in Ancient Beast Mountain. Ancient Beast Mountain was the territory of the True Sword sect. The chaotic killing intent meant that there were many people involved. Out of curiosity and a sense of responsibility as the sect leader, Chu Mu chose to go. His speed increased. The sword light was like a star in the daytime. It cut through the blue sky and flew towards the chaotic killing intent. Blood flowed from the corner of Ma Jingtao's mouth. His face was pale. His robe was tattered and charred. He was already heavily injured because his opponents had gone from 3 to 7. He was defeated in an instant. The 36 Tiangang sword formation was broken by an even stronger force and collapsed. The 36 Spirit Condensation Realm elite disciples were all injured. There were also many disciples who were escorted over. 1 core disciple, 36 elite disciples. Including the ones from before, there are a total of 3 core disciples and 60 elite disciples. I wonder what price the True Sword sect will have to pay. A Nirvana stage black-clothed masked man said with a malicious smile. They attacked but didn't kill them. Their goal was to blackmail the True Sword sect. Okay, put away all the Red Cloud steel ores first, the leader said. If it had been in the past, they would have killed everyone and taken away all the ores that had been mined, erasing all traces of them to avoid the revenge of the True Sword sect. But now they had injured and captured these people, preparing to let the True Sword sect pay a price to redeem them. The drawbacks of the True Sword sect's loss of strength due to the rebellion began to show. Ma Jingtao and the others didn't say anything, but their eyes were full of hatred. If looks could kill, these men in black would have been riddled with holes. At this moment, a beam of sword light pierced through the air, stopped in the air, and descended. Someone else is here. 4th Heavenly Layer Nirvana Realm. Looks like they're from the True Sword sect. A captive who delivered herself to my doorstep. The Nirvana Realm black-clothed people shouted out one after another. Sect Master. When Ma Jingtao and the other 2 Nirvana Realm martial artists saw the person who had arrived, their expressions instantly changed greatly. The 60 elite disciples were the same as well, and they cried out involuntarily in shock. Sect Master, leave now! Ma Jingtao hurriedly shouted. Sect Leader! The Sect Master of the True Sword Sect? The rumors are true. The True Sword Sect has a Sect Master, but his cultivation is actually so low. If we capture him, the True Sword Sect will have to pay a huge price to redeem him. The black-clothed masked man was startled at first, but soon became overjoyed. Capturing 10 or even 100 core disciples was probably not as useful as capturing a sect master. Moreover, capturing a sect master would definitely be a huge blow to the True Sword Sect. This was especially true for the True Sword Sect, which had experienced a rebellion and had many things to do. This kind of blow would be a direct mental blow. It was a very good plan, but unfortunately, they had chosen the wrong person. Chu Mu didn't say anything, but his eyes were extremely cold. These masked men in black were hiding their heads and tails. They actually dared to attack the disciples of the True Sword Sect, and even threatened to capture him right in front of him. Such actions directly infuriated Chu Mu. Ma Jingtao and the other disciples all revealed looks of despair. Their sect master's cultivation was only at the 4th sky of Nirvana realm. No matter how talented he was and how powerful he was, he couldn't fight against so many enemies. But soon they would understand how terrifying and infuriated Chu Mu was. In an instant, a golden light spread out from Chu Mu's body. It flew out like an arc, completely covering the hundreds of masked men in black. Metal force field. You still want to resist. As soon as Chu Mu released the metal force field, the masked men in black immediately exclaimed. They quickly reacted and released their own force field, preparing to suppress Chu Mu's force field. With the sky beheading sword in his hand, the golden sword light spread out and slashed out. The 5 elements sharp metal sword, the golden sword light was dozens of meters long. It instantly slashed through the sky and attacked the masked men in black. The terrifying sharpness that could cut through anything made everyone's expression change drastically. The force field released by the masked men in black was instantly slashed apart, and the technique they used couldn't block it. Under the slash, the golden sword light passed through and directly killed a low-level Nirvana realm masked man in black and dozens of God condensation realm masked men in black. Kill them with all your strength. The other Nirvana realm masked men in black's pupils dilated. They were extremely shocked and hurriedly shouted. At this moment, the golden force field suddenly turned blue, and a moist aura spread out. It was the water force field. The imperishable sword appeared in his hand unknowingly. It turned azure and slashed out with one slash. 5 elements flowing water sword. Metal gave birth to water. The power of the 5 elements flowing water sword suddenly increased by a few notches. The azure sword light was extremely magnificent and magnificent. It was like flowing water. The continuous power attacked, and another force field was slashed apart. It couldn't block it. Another low-level Nirvana realm masked man in black was slashed by the azure sword light. His body was torn apart, and dozens of God condensation realm masked men in black didn't even have a corpse left. 2 slashes. In just 2 slashes, 2 low-level Nirvana realm masked men were killed, and more than 100 God condensation realm masked men were killed. And this was just the beginning. The sword chi broke through the sky, and the multicolored technique attacked with a loud rumble. It wanted to drown Chu Mu and destroy him. The azure force field instantly disappeared, and traces of silver spread out from Chu Mu's body. A terrifying aura rippled out, as if it was tearing through the void. It caused people to tremble in fear as it spread out. Void-shattering force field. After coming to the deep blue world, this was the first time Chu Mu used the void-shattering force field. However, it didn't mean that he didn't cultivate it. The current void-shattering force field was even more tyrannical than the one during the Supreme Seat Challenge. Under the void-shattering force field, all of the sword chi and dermic arts that came attacking were all torn apart by the terrifying void-shattering force field and disappeared. The spirit condensation realm masked men in black had no power to resist. The remaining 5 Nirvana realm masked men in black had eyes filled with shock. The tyrannical void-shattering force field was many times stronger than the metal force field and water force field. It directly suppressed them, causing the power of law they grasped to be weakened by at least 50%, or even 70 to 80%. The power of a technique was closely related to the power of law. After being weakened so much, the power of the technique would also be greatly reduced. Fear. These masked men in black were incomparably alarmed. They never thought that the person they thought they could easily capture would be such a terrifying existence. Speaking of which, these masked men couldn't be compared to the 4 core disciples of the Skyblaze sect who chased after Chu Mu. An 8th heavenly layer Nirvana realm cultivator like He Zijian was ranked among the top among the core disciples of the Skyblaze sect. The strength of the other 3 7th heavenly layer Nirvana realm disciples wasn't something that ordinary 7th heavenly layer Nirvana realm cultivators could compare to. Any one of them had the tyrannical strength to annihilate this group of masked men, not to mention Chu Mu, who could fight against them. With a thought, the bodies of all the God Condensation realm masked men in black were torn to shreds. It was as if they had been sliced by some terrifying invisible blade. This scene made the 5 Nirvana realm masked men in black tremble. Terrifying. It was too terrifying. This kind of method was unimaginable. Was this really the strength of an early 4th heavenly layer Nirvana realm cultivator? Chu Mu pointed his sword at the Nirvana realm masked men in black. A silver light flickered on the blade and instantly shot out. Void-shattering sword chi. The void-piercing sword chi, which was imbued with the power of the void, was extremely terrifying as it shot out. The void-piercing force field enveloped the 5 Nirvana realm masked men in black. They couldn't dodge or resist. In an instant, the void-piercing force field pierced through their foreheads. The void-piercing force field retracted. The bodies of the 5 Nirvana realm masked men in black fell backward. Their foreheads were pierced through, but no blood flowed out. Under the void-piercing sword chi, their bodies turned into nothingness. The terrifying strength of a peerless monstrous genius was invincible among those of the same level. Ma Jingtao and the other true sword sect disciples were all dumbfounded. Their minds froze, and they couldn't react at all. They stared blankly at Chu Mu. Who dares to invade our true sword sect's mind? A fierce shout filled with murderous intent rang out. Shortly after, a tyrannical aura gushed out, awakening Ma Jingtao and the others. Take care of it. Return to the sect, Chu Mu said as he turned into a sword light and left with a whoosh. Sect Master is so strong. An elite disciple murmured, which immediately caused a strong resonance. That's our Sect Master. He's only at the 4th sky of Nirvana realm, but he's so terrifyingly strong. Ma Jingtao clenched his fist. At this moment, figures appeared one after another. They were the core disciples of the true sword sect. They rushed over with murderous intent, but when they saw the corpses of the Nirvana realm masked men in black, they were all stunned. What's going on? A core disciple who rushed over asked. Before you, the sect master arrived and took action, Ma Jingtao replied. In the sect master's hall of the true sword sect, Chu Mu sat on the throne and looked down. Below him was Elder Yun Feng of the Wind Trust Hall. Sect Master, we've investigated thoroughly. The intruders came from the Quicksand Gang, the Alchemist clan, and the Yang clan, Elder Yun Feng said. The Quicksand Gang, the Alchemist clan, and the Yang clan are at the foot of the ancient beast mountain. Elder Yun Feng explained the situation of the Quicksand Gang, the Alchemist clan, and the Yang clan to Chu Mu in detail. None of the 3 forces were able to contend against the true sword sect from before. Even though the true sword sect had been damaged, none of the 3 forces were a match for them in a one-on-one situation. However, when the 3 forces worked together, as long as the great elders of the True Sword sect did not act, they would not be able to contend against them. Perhaps it was because the True Sword sect had gone through a rebellion and suffered heavy losses that the three forces dared to work together and attack the True Sword sect. The reason why they were masked and dressed in black was because they didn't want to reveal their identities. The reason why they attacked the mine was because they wanted to take the initiative and test the True Sword sect. However, they had to pay a price for doing so. Chapter 1340. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One figure after another shot through the air, shooting out from the True Sword sect and heading down the mountain. There were 13 people in total. Chu Mu was the leader, and beside him were Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He. There were also 10 core disciples of the True Sword sect. Every single one of them had reached the middle level of the Nirvana realm. Actually, it should be said that there were 14 of them, because the Supreme Third Elder was secretly following them. His expression was calm, but he felt helpless in his heart. This time, Chu Mu's goal was to settle accounts with the Quicksand Gang and the other two factions. Under normal circumstances, there was no need for him to personally move out as the sect master, nor was there a need for Elder Yun Feng or Elder Yun He. However, the current True Sword sect lacked people. A complete sect must have various departments, and one of them must be a department in charge of external warfare, which could deal with the current situation. However, the current True Sword sect did not have such a department. In this situation, Chu Mu had no choice but to personally lead the two elders and the most powerful core disciple. As for the Supreme Third Elder, he was secretly following them as a safeguard. Under normal circumstances, the Supreme Third Elder would not appear, nor would he take action. He was only a trump card. The goal of this trip was the Quicksand Gang. Elder Yun Feng of the Wind Trust Hall had already told Chu Mu about the strength of the Quicksand Gang. The Quicksand Gang's leader, Su Sha, was at the 7th heavenly layer of Nirvana realm. There was another 7th heavenly layer Nirvana realm and 3 6th heavenly layer Nirvana realm elders in the gang. There were also more than 10 5th and 4th heavenly layer Nirvana realm experts. All in all, the overall strength of the Quicksand Gang was quite strong. The Alchemist sect and the Yang family were on par with the Quicksand Gang in terms of strength. Only when the three of them joined forces did they dare to attack the True Sword sect, whose strength had been greatly reduced. Now it was time for them to pay their debt. 13 figures tore through the sky like meteors. Who is it? Stop. As soon as they approached, the Quicksand Gang immediately discovered them. Someone immediately shouted in an attempt to stop them. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. He didn't make any movements, but the two figures that tried to jump up from the ground to intercept him were cut in half at the waist. Two mere deity condensation realms were like ants in front of him. The deaths of the two spirit condensation realm martial artists also alerted the other members of the Quicksand Gang. Immediately, a Nirvana realm martial artist shot into the sky. Who are you? You actually dared to kill a member of my Quicksand Gang? Aren't you being too arrogant? True Sword sect. Chu Mu didn't say anything, but one of the core disciples, Su Ming, said coldly. The other party's expression abruptly changed, and his pupils trembled, but returned to normal in an instant. Why would the True Sword sect come to our small Quicksand Gang? Tell Su Sha to come out, Chu Mu said calmly. Our sect leader is not here. The Nirvana Realm cultivator said. If you don't come out, the Quicksand Gang will be destroyed. Chu Mu's tone was calm, as if he was stating a fact, but it caused the 5 core disciples to become excited. Such a powerful sect master was what they yearned for in their hearts. The previous vice-sect leader had a gentle personality and was not domineering enough. He was also not decisive enough. As Chu Mu's voice fell, a terrifying aura exploded from everyone's body. It was peerlessly sharp, causing the faces of the Quicksand Gang members to change drastically. Su Sha, get out here! Elder Yun He's roar resounded through the sky like rolling thunder. One after another, silhouettes shot into the sky and appeared in front of everyone. The leader was a dark-skinned middle-aged man. The aura on his body was at the seventh sky of Nirvana realm. Beside him was an expressionless old man, who was also emitting an aura at the seventh sky of Nirvana realm. These two people, one was the Quicksand Gang's sect leader, Su Sha, and the other was the Quicksand Gang's great elder. Behind them were 3 elders at the sixth sky of Nirvana realm, as well as more than a dozen low-level and mid-level Nirvana realm martial artists. So it's the True Sword Sect's elders Yun Feng and Yun He, as well as the True Sword Sect's disciples. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. The dark-skinned middle-aged man, Su Sha, acted as if nothing had happened. At first, he was surprised, then he was overjoyed. He smiled and cupped his hands. Come, everyone, please come in. You have 2 choices. Chu Mu said calmly, first, annihilate the gang. Second, pay the price. Who are you? You want us to annihilate the gang as soon as you open your mouth. Aren't you too arrogant? Su Sha was furious. An elder of the Quicksand Gang mocked. This is our sect leader. Elder Yun, he smiled coldly. Sect leader? The new sect leader of the True Sword Sect. Su Sha and the others' eyelids twitched. So you're the new sect leader of the True Sword Sect. You're indeed a talent. Su Sha laughed out loud. The 4 of them looked very comical. It's our honor to welcome the new sect leader. Please, please, the Quicksand Gang will do our best to welcome the sect leader and the elders' disciples. Su Sha, don't change the topic. The sect leader will give you 2 choices. Choose one. Yun Feng said with a smile. What's going on here? Does the sect leader have some misunderstanding about our Quicksand Gang? Su Sha argued. If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Yun Feng smiled. After the Quicksand Gang, the Alchemist sect will be next, and then the Yang family. Yun Feng's words made the pupils of Su Sha and the others shrink. It seemed that they had been exposed. I heard that the True Sword Sect went through a turmoil not long ago and lost a lot of people. Since they already knew, Su Sha didn't try to hide it. Instead, she threatened, although our Quicksand Gang is just a small gang, it's not that easy to deal with. Actually, if the Quicksand Gang knew that the True Sword Sect had 7 great elders on the level of Sword Saint, they would never have provoked them. However, the 7 great elders had not appeared in public for many years already. Let alone people outside the sect like the Quicksand Gang, even the official and elite disciples of the True Sword Sect did not know about the existence of the 7 great elders. Only core disciples had the right to know about them. So, you're choosing the first option. Chu Mu's tone was indifferent. A silver light flashed in his eyes, making Su Sha feel a chill for some reason. It was simply like a joke. He was a dignified cultivator at the 7th level of the Rebirth Realm, yet he actually felt threatened by a mere cultivator at the initial stage of the 4th level of the Rebirth Realm. After all, it was a gap of 3 levels. Su Sha didn't know that although Chu Mu's cultivation was only at the 4th layer, the power of his sword origin wasn't inferior to most 5th layer Nirvana realm cultivators. Moreover, he had a terrifying physique. He could slaughter ordinary middle-level Nirvana realm cultivators like killing pigs and dogs. Although 7th layer Nirvana realm cultivators were powerful, as long as they weren't peerless geniuses, Chu Mu could definitely fight or even kill them. As Chu Mu's voice rang out, the eyes of the 10 core disciples blossomed with an icy luster. Each of their auras surged, as if divine swords had been unsheathed, revealing their sharpness. In terms of strength, you're on par with our Quicksand Gang. Once we fight, our Quicksand Gang will suffer great losses. You won't be able to gain any benefit. Su Sha said furiously with a ferocious expression. Those who could become a gang leader weren't ordinary people. They had their own ability and courage. What he said could be considered to be the truth. Looking at the number of people, it was about the same. Then looking at the cultivation, it was about the same. Destroy the gang. Chu Mu directly gave the order. Yes. Whether it was Elder Yun Feng, Elder Yun He or the 10 core disciples, they all revealed an excited expression. Their sword origin erupted and a powerful aura spread out. They unsheathed their swords and with a dazzling sword light, they slashed towards Su Sha and the others. The true sword sect's attack was too fast, exceeding the expectations of Su Sha and the others. They had thought that the true sword sect would continue to wrangle with them, and in the end, threaten them before leaving when their strength was about the same. However, the reality was beyond their expectations. Kill! Su Sha and the others quickly reacted and quickly counterattacked. Traces of silver spread out from Chu Mu's body. Without hesitation, he directly used the void-shattering force field, covering an area of more than 1,000 meters, covering all the experts of the Quicksand Gang. Then, Chu Mu raised his sword. On the sky-beheading sword, traces of silver light flickered. As the sky-beheading sword trembled, tiny cracks appeared on the edge of the sword. A terrifying spatial energy fluctuation spread out, causing people's hearts to palpitate. Advanced secret art, Void Nirvana sword. This was the first time Chu Mu used the Void Nirvana sword against an enemy. It was also the first time he displayed its powerful strength. A sword slashed out. Suddenly, a silver sword light, like a line between the sky and the water, silently cut open the void. Su Sha and the others' faces changed drastically. The aura of nirvana emitted from the silver sword light made them tremble. Dodge! Su Sha roared and dodged with all his strength. The great elder of the Quicksand Gang also dodged with fear, but the other Nirvana realm experts were a bit slower. A line was the distance between life and death. Silently, the silver sword light cut open the void, leaving a black mark. It also cut through the body of a 6th Sky Nirvana Realm Elder, 2 5th Sky Nirvana Realm Cultivators, and 2 4th Sky Nirvana Realm Cultivators. With one sword, 5 people were killed instantly. Stop! Su Sha roared. His voice was very sharp and filled with fear. Wrong, completely wrong. They never thought that the new sect master of the real sword sect, who was only at the early stage of the 4th sky of Nirvana realm, would be so terrifying. One sword strike, just one sword strike, made them feel the threat of death and instantly killed 5 experts of the Quicksand Gang. In the situation where 5 experts were killed, the difference between the experts of the Quicksand Gang and the real sword sect immediately became huge. If a war broke out, the real sword sect would be able to destroy the Quicksand Gang as long as they didn't pay a big price. If that terrifying monstrous sect master slashed out with that sword again, perhaps the real sword sect would not have to pay any price to destroy the Quicksand Gang. Chapter 1341. Within the void-shattering force field, silver light flickered on the sky-beheading sword. The space around the edge of the sword was filled with dense cracks that made people's hearts palpitate. Sure enough, he could use a second sword. Su Sha and the others all wore terrified expressions. Terrifying, too terrifying. On the other hand, Elder Yun Feng He and the 10 core disciples of the true sword sect were shocked and overjoyed. This was their sect master. He was so powerful that he could fight against a 7th Sky Nirvana stage monster with a 4th Sky Nirvana stage. Under the void-shattering force field, everyone was suppressed. Currently, Chu Mu couldn't differentiate between them. Chu Mu didn't use the second sword, but the void-shattering force and Nirvana stage power gathered on the sword, intimidating the experts of the Quicksand Gang. We choose the second option, Su Sha said. Her tone was bitter and even a little regretful. If she had known, she would have made the choice and saved 5 experts from dying. The death of 1 6th Sky of Nirvana Layer, 2 5th Sky of Nirvana Layer, and 2 4th Sky of Nirvana Layer, in addition to the previous few, was definitely a huge blow to the Quicksand Gang. In an instant, the overall strength of the Quicksand Gang had decreased by a lot. If they let the opponent use another sword, even if she and the Great Elder could dodge it, a few more people would die. The loss would be even greater. At that time, the gang would basically be annihilated. All the Nirvana stage experts would die, leaving behind a group of divine condensation stage experts. They wouldn't be a threat to Nirvana stage experts at all. After the gang was annihilated, everything of the Quicksand Gang would become the true sword sects. If you knew this would happen, why bother? Chu Mu said indifferently. Since you chose the second option, then pay the price. Elder Yunfeng smiled and waved his hand. Instantly, a piece of white paper flew out. On the white paper, the price that the Quicksand Gang had to pay was written. Su Sha's face turned green when she took a look. This is too. Su Sha's tone was bitter, and her heart was filled with anger. Chu Mu didn't say anything. He just gently raised the sword in his hand, and a terrifying Nirvana stage energy rippled out. Su Sha took a deep breath and swallowed the rest of her words. A powerful force was a deterrent. She had to obey, or else she would die. It will be ready in an hour, Chu Mu said indifferently. It wasn't easy for him to maintain the power on the sword. It was a huge burden. Half an hour was very rushed. Su Sha immediately gave the order to mobilize the Quicksand Gang's collection. There were a lot of things listed on the list, and some of them were very valuable. This time, the Quicksand Gang had suffered a huge loss, and their collection of things had shrunk by at least 70%. This was the price, the huge price to pay for provoking the tiger's whiskers. In less than an hour, the Quicksand Gang had delivered all the items on the list. There are some people you can't afford to offend. Leaving behind these words, Chu Mu took the 2 elders and 10 core disciples of the True Sword sect and quickly left the Quicksand Gang, heading in the direction of the Alchemist sect. Gang Master. Second elder flew over. This time, we admit defeat. Su Sha's face was gloomy. She didn't expect the True Sword sect to retaliate like this with just a probing operation. This was different from what they knew. The new leader of the True Sword sect doesn't have a high cultivation base, but he is very strong. He is a monster. Moreover, he is a ruthless and decisive person. If you can't kill this kind of person instantly, it's best not to make him your enemy. The expressionless head elder, who hadn't said anything until now, suddenly said, "This time, we have suffered a huge loss. From now on, we have to keep a low profile and focus on recovering." Su Sha nodded and gave the order. As for revenge, she didn't want to think about it for now, because it was impossible unless something unexpected happened. 13 people, including the 3rd great elder who was hiding in the dark, flew towards the alchemist sect. The 10 core disciples looked at Chu Mu's back with excitement in their eyes. Only such a leader could make them believe wholeheartedly. Only such a leader could make them fight for him with their blood. The 3rd great elder who was hiding in the dark also nodded. The True Sword sect indeed needed a strong leader to lead them. Avoiding them would only weaken the disciples' passion and fighting spirit, which was not good for the Alchemist sect. The Alchemist sect didn't know what happened to the Quicksand Gang. Therefore, when Chu Mu brought the True Sword sect to the sky above the Alchemist sect finally reacted. The leader of the Alchemist sect was called Wang Lai. His cultivation base was higher than Su Sha's. He was at the peak of the 7th sky of Nirvana realm, and could break through to the 8th sky of Nirvana realm at any time. However, the gap between the peak of the 7th sky of Nirvana realm and the 8th sky of Nirvana realm was huge. Even some super geniuses might not be able to break through. Other than having great talent, they also needed great luck. The Quicksand Gang was an organization, so they could have any kind of people. However, the Alchemist sect was a sect that focused on fire art. So it's the elder and disciple of the True Sword sect. Why didn't you inform me first, so that I could arrange for my disciples to welcome you? In the sky above the Alchemist sect, Wang Lai laughed, as if he didn't understand why the True Sword sect would come here. Leader Wang, we just came from the Quicksand Gang. The Quicksand Gang has already paid enough. Yun Feng smiled gently, giving people a feeling of warmth. Wang Lai's expression changed abruptly, but returned to normal in an instant. I see. Actually, the Quicksand Gang is the mastermind behind this. We, the alchemist sect, can only be considered as an accomplice. Wang Lai said, Of course, I am not trying to shirk the responsibility. We are willing to pay the price to appease the true sword sect. So smart. Then, take it. Elder Yunfeng smiled and threw out a piece of paper filled with words, Prepare it in an hour. Wang Lai took a look at it. His breathing became rapid, and his pupils contracted, but quickly returned to normal. I will go and make preparations now, Wang Lai said in a calm tone. Soon after, he quickly descended. Get ready for battle. Chu Mu's voice sounded. It was very calm. Yun Feng and Yun He were startled, but soon smiled. Wang Lai's reaction was too calm, which was abnormal. They were afraid that he was not going to prepare the treasures, but to gather the people to kill them. Yun Feng he was worried that Chu Mu was too young, so he wanted to remind him. However, he didn't expect that Chu Mu didn't need to be reminded. A strong and wise sect leader. This was an outstanding sect leader. The 10 core disciples were fully alert. Their chi surged, and they were ready to attack at any time. At this moment, beams of fiery light turned into terrifyingly huge fiery dragons. They roared and rushed out from the alchemist sect, shooting towards the people in the sky. The scorching chi fluctuated wildly, as if the air had been ignited. It was incomparably dry. The clouds in the sky also turned red, as if they were about to burn. A terrifying pressure pressed down from the sky, as if the sky was about to shatter. The people of the alchemist sect had made their move. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you want to barge in. All of you die. Wang Lai's savage and ferocious voice rang out, entering everyone's ears. Kill. A low shout was heard, filled with killing intent. Rumbling sounds exploded. The terrifying void around Chu Mu was vibrating. With a wave of the sky's sword, it was as if everything in front of him was sliced apart. His body dove down. A fiery dragon rushed over, roaring, wanting to collide with Chu Mu and destroy him. A beam of silver light flashed in Chu Mu's eyes, incomparably cold. The sky sword slashed forward, and a blue sword light was like a tidal wave. A sword slash broke apart the fiery dragon. Chu Mu dove down like a meteor. The 2 elders, Yun Feng and Yun He, followed closely behind Chu Mu, protecting Chu Mu at all times. As he approached, the void-shattering force field was released, covering an area of more than 1,000 meters, covering Wang Lai and the others. Traces of silver light gathered on the sky sword, and a terrifying fluctuation spread out, causing Wang Lai and the others' faces to change abruptly. High-level martial art. Void Destruction Sword. The power of this martial art was extremely powerful. Forces like the Quicksand Gang and the Alchemist sect didn't even have any martial art, let alone how to block it. The sky sword slashed down with a silver light. In an instant, 100-meter-long silver sword light, like a thread connecting the sky and the water, silently sliced apart the space. It was extremely fast, rushing towards Wang Lai and the others. Wang Lai's cultivation was profound, and the 2 elders of the alchemist sect, who had reached the 7th sky of the Nirvana realm, were not weak either. They sensed the great danger and quickly dodged, but the other Nirvana realm experts were too late. This sword attack worked, and it was even more powerful than when it was in the Quicksand Gang, because it carried Chu Mu's anger. Wang Lai and the head elder dodged, but they were fine. However, they were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. However, the 2nd elder had lost an arm, and the 3rd elder and the 4th elder had lost their bodies. They were dead. Along with them, there were a few mid-level and low-level Nirvana realm experts. This sword attack was performed with Chu Mu's full power, and it contained the 7th realm sword power. Under the enhancement of the void-shattering force field and the suppression of the opponents, its power was extremely terrifying. The cultivators of the alchemist sect were just ordinary cultivators. They weren't geniuses, and they didn't have many tricks up their sleeves. Naturally, they couldn't resist this attack. While Wang Lai and the others were still in shock, Yunfeng and Yun, he also performed the powerful Earth Realm sword art and attack. 10 core disciples rushed into the alchemist sect. When they joined forces, their power was shocking. With Chu Mu as the leader, with only one sword attack, the alchemist sect's people had lost their will to fight. They could only use 70% of their power. Chu Mu raised the sky beheading sword again. Silver light gathered, and he performed the void nirvana sword for the second time. He showed no mercy. Stop! Stop! Wang Lai roared. He was scared, and he regretted it. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to attack the real sword sect's people. However, this time, Chu Mu didn't show mercy. Kill, kill, kill. Without Chu Mu's order, Yunfeng and Yunhe, the 2 elders, and the 10 core disciples wouldn't show mercy either. They used all of their power to kill. The total number of Nirvana realm experts of the alchemist sect was only around 20. In just a short while, 1/3 of them were killed by Chu Mu. With the second void nirvana sword, he killed another 5 or 6. The difference between the two sides was too great. The alchemist sect was destroyed. Chapter 1342. Watching the real sword sect and the others leave, the Yang clan leader's eyes were filled with gloom. Clan leader. An elder walked over. No need to say more. The enemy is strong and we are weak. We will submit for now. When our great ancestor comes out, we will settle this with the real sword sect, the Yang clan leader said in a deep voice. The Quicksand Gang had paid a great price for losing some Nirvana realm warriors. The alchemist sect had been destroyed. The Yang clan was more sensible. Although they had paid a great price, none of them had died. The result of this operation was satisfactory. When they left, there were 13 people in the light and 1 in the dark. When they returned, there were still 13 people in the light and 1 in the dark. There was no loss at all. The 2 elders, Yunfeng and Yunhe, stood beside Chu Mu. They looked calm. The 10 core disciples, on the other hand, were all excited. Starting with the Quicksand Gang and ending with the Yang clan, the Quicksand Gang showed off their power, the alchemist sect fought fiercely, and the Yang clan surrendered. All of this made them feel like they were dreaming. Although the real sword sect was stronger in the past, they had never been so powerful. These 10 core disciples had witnessed Chu Mu's power with their own eyes. They admired this clan leader from the bottom of their hearts. They even felt a trace of worship towards him. One had to admit that this operation was very rewarding. Although the Quicksand Gang was not as powerful as the real sword sect, it was still a force that had been around for more than 100 years. They had a lot of treasures. After losing 70%, the Quicksand Gang's wealth and resources had decreased greatly. The alchemist sect was even more powerful than the Quicksand Gang. After it was destroyed, everything from the alchemist sect would be returned to the real sword sect. The Yang clan was similar to the Quicksand Gang. 70% of their wealth and resources were not inferior to the Quicksand Gang. The harvest this time is enough to open the spiritual pool of our sect again, Elder Yunfeng said. Yes. The clan leader's cultivation is a bit low. He should open the spiritual pool and cultivate inside. He should try his best to increase his cultivation, Elder Yunhe said. They had seen Chu Mu's strength with their own eyes. He was very powerful. Even compared to them, he was not inferior at all. He might even be stronger. However, the clan leader's cultivation was only at the early stage of the 4th sky of Nirvana realm. If the clan leader was at the 5th, 6th, or even 7th sky of Nirvana realm, wouldn't he be able to sweep through the Nirvana realm? The true sword sect needed a strong and wise sect master, as well as a powerful sect master. The spirit pool was a cultivation holy land of the true sword sect. Every time it was opened, it would consume a huge amount of energy. Because the true sword sect had declined, it had not been opened for decades. It wasn't that it couldn't be opened, but once it was opened, a huge amount of energy would be consumed, and it was enough to make the sword sect's collection shrink by more than half. However, it was different now. With the compensation from the Quicksand Gang, the alchemist sect, and the Yang family, it was enough to open the spirit pool once and still have some left over. When the disciples of the True Sword sect found out about this, they were all overjoyed. All that was left was for the entire sect to celebrate. Which disciple didn't yearn for the sect to become strong and powerful? After returning to the sect, Chu Mu agreed to open the spiritual pool under the suggestion of Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He. The spirit pool was an important treasure left behind by the True Sword sect. Normally, it was hidden, and only the sect master had the right to open it. When there was no sect master, the vice-sect masters and the various elders could decide whether to open it or not. The palm-sized spirit pool emitted weak ripples. Executing the corresponding seal art, the golden sword key rippled and shot toward the spirit pool. In an instant, the spirit pool soared into the air and expanded rapidly. At the same time, the ripples of its aura also became stronger. Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He hurriedly took out a large amount of compensation from the Quicksand Gang, the Alchemist sect, and the Yang family, and threw them into the spirit pool. They sank into the spirit pool and quickly melted. The crystal-clear spirit pool water gradually turned white and spread out. Dense spirit chi ripples spread out. When the spirit pool water completely turned milky white, Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He stopped throwing in the spirit pool water. "Sect Master, you can enter now," said Elder Yun Feng. "Thank you for your trouble, elders," said Chu Mu. In a flash, he entered the spirit pool. The spirit pool was placed in the back hall of the sect. Various seals were activated to prevent people from entering. Elder Yun Feng left to deal with the matter, while Elder Yun He stayed behind. Inside the spirit pool, Chu Mu was immersed in the milky white spirit pool water. The spirit pool water reached his neck. Wisps of white-colored aura rose and spiraled upwards, circling around the spiritual pool, causing it to have a trace of a fairyland. Without needing to actively absorb it, the spirit pool's spirit chi automatically entered Chu Mu's body. This kind of energy was slightly different from heaven and earth yuan chi, but there was no difference in essence. It was just that heaven and earth yuan chi was mainly used to cultivate sword origin or similar energy, while spirit chi was more widely used. Not only could it be used to cultivate sword origin, but it could also be used to cultivate one's physique. Chu Mu circulated the divine wilderness sword art and astral calamity cultivation technique at the same time. He cultivated both chi and earth to speed up the absorption of the spirit pool's spirit chi. Gurgling sounds could be heard from the spiritual pool as bubbles appeared and burst one after another, releasing shocking spiritual energy fluctuations. Relying on himself to cultivate both chi and body at the same time, Chu Mu's talent on the path of cultivation was rather average, so his normal cultivation speed was even slower. It would take at least a few years to break through from the fourth sky of Nirvana realm to the fifth sky of Nirvana realm. But now that he had the spirit pool, it was different. In a short period of time, his cultivation would definitely rise by another sky. Pure spirit chi constantly surged into his body. A portion of it was absorbed by the divine wilderness sword origin, strengthening the divine wilderness sword origin. A portion of it was absorbed by his physique and muscles, tempering every part of his body. Elder Yun He stood by the side with a solemn expression, guarding him. Actually, there was no need for him to stay, because there was a Grand Elder watching from the shadows. It was the Grand Supreme Third Elder. One had to know that after seeing Chu Mu's tyrannical strength, domineering attitude and unyielding methods, the Grand Supreme Third Elder was extremely satisfied with the new sect master of the True Sword sect. Such an outstanding sect master, no matter what, he would not let him be in danger. If necessary, he was even willing to give up his life to ensure the sect master's safety. Chu Mu's body was like a huge sponge, constantly absorbing spirit chi, transforming it into physique and divine wilderness sword origin. His early-stage cultivation was also rapidly rising. An increasingly powerful aura was emitted from Chu Mu's body. As his cultivation increased, the speed of absorbing and refining spirit chi also steadily increased, increasing the efficiency. Sect Master's sword origin is terrifyingly pure. The Grand Supreme Third Elder, who was secretly watching, was surprised. He could feel that the sword origin aura that Chu Mu was emitting was not something that an ordinary fourth sky of Nirvana realm sword cultivator would have. The early fourth sky of Nirvana realm rose to the middle fourth sky of Nirvana realm, and then to the late fourth sky of Nirvana realm. The spirit pool's spirit chi was constantly being absorbed, and a huge amount of spirit chi filled his body. The fluctuations became stronger and stronger. The feeling of such a huge amount of pure spirit chi filling his body was simply too great. If a person's physique was not strong enough, they would not be able to withstand it. But Chu Mu's physique was extremely strong, so bearing it became an enjoyment. Feeling his cultivation rapidly rising, he wanted to immerse himself in it forever. While Chu Mu was working hard to raise his cultivation, the disciples of the True Sword sect were excitedly discussing this matter. The words of the 10 core disciples had spread throughout the True Sword sect. All of a sudden, the sect leader had become the idol of all the disciples. As for the disciples of the True Sword sect, they were even more motivated. They cultivated even more diligently. The entire True Sword sect was filled with a good atmosphere. People who were cultivating diligently could be seen everywhere. It was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. After a day and a night, Chu Mu stopped cultivating. Because he had reached the peak of the fourth sky of Nirvana realm, the spirit pool in his body was saturated. He could no longer absorb any more. And there was still a small amount of spirit chi left in the spirit pool. It's time for the fifth nirvana, Chu Mu thought to himself as he took out a large amount of nirvana chi. The True Sword sect had collected a lot of nirvana chi. This time, they had also obtained a lot of nirvana chi from the Quicksand Gang and the Alchemist sect's Yang family. It was enough for Chu Mu to undergo 5, 6, 7, and so on. Seeing this, the third Supreme Elder hurriedly gathered the other 2 Supreme Elders. He's about to break through, the fifth Supreme Elder said. Fifth sky of Nirvana realm. With the sect master's talent, I wonder how big the commotion will be? The seventh Supreme Elder asked curiously. I'm guessing that with our sect master's talent, his spirit cloud should be able to reach 9 miles, the third Supreme Elder said. While the 3 Supreme Elders were discussing, Chu Mu's nirvana had also begun. His flesh and blood were crushed under the impact of the nirvana chi. Then, all the nirvana chi surged like rivers into the sea, attacking Chu Mu's dantian. His dantian was torn apart, just like his flesh and blood before. The sect master's physique is too strong. The amount of nirvana chi required for one nirvana realm is several times more than ordinary people, the seventh Supreme Elder said in surprise. This means that the sect master's talent is far superior to ordinary cultivators, the fifth Supreme Elder said. That's for sure, the third Supreme Elder said with certainty. It's a blessing for the True Sword sect to have such a sect master. While everyone was discussing, Chu Mu's flesh and dantian were completely crushed under the nirvana chi. It was constantly attacked and refined. The refinement of the dantian was the most obvious, because from the first sky to the third sky, the refinement of the physique and flesh was completed. From the fourth sky to the sixth sky, the refinement of the dantian was the main focus. When the refinement began, the yuan chi of heaven and earth gathered from all directions. Whistling sounds rang out. The disciples of the True Sword sect noticed the commotion and raised their heads to look at the sky. In the clear blue sky, streaks of white chi had appeared from all directions at some point in time. Each of these streaks of white chi emitted shocking yuan chi ripples. What's going on? It's coming from the direction of the sect master's hall. Could it be that the sect master's cultivation has broken through and is about to undergo nirvana realm? The core disciples were the ones who saw it the most and guessed. If the sect master's breakthrough is at the fifth sky of nirvana realm, wouldn't his strength be? The 10 core disciples who followed Chu Mu were even more excited. Chapter 1343. What a huge origin chi cloud! A voice exclaimed, expressing the thoughts of the disciples. All the disciples of the True Sword sect looked up at the first origin chi cloud in the sky. Their eyes widened as they exclaimed in amazement. The nominal disciples at the foot of Ancient Beast Mountain all felt it too. They looked on with shock and yearning. They guessed that it might be one of their senior brothers or sisters breaking through, but they didn't know that it was actually the sect leader of the Real Sword sect who was breaking through. Of course, they only knew that the True Sword sect had an additional sect leader, but they didn't know what kind of sect leader it was. It's 9 miles. The origin chi cloud has reached 9 miles. Someone exclaimed. Up until now, none of the core disciples of the True Sword sect had reached 9 miles of origin chi cloud. Even before the rebellion, none of the core disciples had reached 9 miles of origin chi clouds. Our sect leader's talent is so high. This exclamation was just the beginning. The 9 miles of origin chi clouds continued to expand. 9 miles of 9. They were stunned. What? They seemed to have turned into wooden dummies. I didn't expect the origin chi cloud to reach 9 miles of 9. The third highest elder and the other 2 were all stunned. 9 miles of 9 was the limit of origin chi clouds. Since ancient times, very few people had reached it. It was only a legend. Today they saw it with their own eyes. It was a legend. Good, good, good. The 5th highest elder's tone was unusually excited. The first origin chi cloud was successfully formed. The origin chi of heaven and earth continued to gather, stirring up the clouds. White origin chi could be seen surging in the sky above Ancient Beast Mountain like a long river. The second origin chi cloud also began to form. It's 9 miles of 9 again. Another exclamation was heard. It was said that when some cultivators underwent nirvana, the first origin chi cloud would be the largest. However, the second origin chi cloud might not be the same as the first. It might be smaller. After the second origin chi cloud was formed, the third origin chi cloud began to form. It's 9 miles of 9 again. The fourth origin chi cloud was formed once again. It's 9 miles of 9 again. At this moment, the shock was starting to become a little numb. The fifth origin chi cloud was the same as the previous 4, 9. 5 primordial chi clouds, all 9 miles long, gathered in the sky above the Ancient Beast Mountain sect's main hall. They were arranged in 5 different directions, emitting a huge pressure. Rich primordial chi of heaven and earth was constantly emitted from them, shocking the surroundings. Outside Ancient Beast Mountain, people like the Quicksand Gang and the Yangshi family also saw the 5 huge Yuan Chi cloud. They were all shocked. Who's breaking through? 5 origin energy clouds. He should have broken through to the 5th level of the Nirvana realm. Every origin energy cloud has reached 9 miles. As Su Sha spoke, his tone contained unconcealable shock. In his heart, a figure unconsciously flashed past. A terrifying figure instantly killed 5 Nirvana realm experts with a single sword strike. Furthermore, they also knew that the alchemist sect had been exterminated. 9 Yuan Chi cloud, what a monster! The usually expressionless first elder's face was filled with shock, and his voice was incomparably hoarse. Su Sha secretly made a decision. Before he had absolute confidence, he would never provoke the Real Sword sect again. Chu Mu didn't know that his breakthrough had caused a huge deterrence to the Quicksand Gang. This deterrence was even more effective than him personally killing 5 Nirvana realm experts. 5th Elder, 7th Elder, be careful. Don't let anyone disturb the sect master's breakthrough. The 3rd Elder transmitted his voice. If the breakthrough was disturbed, it would be very likely to be interrupted. Once interrupted, the consequences would be severe. Minor injuries would be severe, and major injuries would be fatal. Even if they were lucky and didn't die or get injured, it would still affect their potential. Furthermore, the next breakthrough would be more than 10 times harder. Not to mention that Chu Mu was the sect master of the real sword sect. Even if he was just a disciple, with such talent, he deserved the 3 great elders to do their best for him. Fearing that they didn't have enough strength, the 3rd elder even summoned the other 4 great elders who were in seclusion. 9 Yuan Qi Cloud. 5. The 4 great elders who just appeared felt an extremely strong fluctuation of primordial qi of heaven and earth and were instantly shocked. The sect master is breaking through. The 5th Nirvana. I didn't expect the sect master's talent to be so high. Extreme primordial qi cloud. The rise of our real sword sect is just around the corner. Immediately, the 7 great elders secretly took action. 1 stayed in the main hall of the sect, while the other 6 were scattered around Ancient Beast Mountain. On one hand, they tried their best to suppress the fluctuations, and on the other hand, they wanted to prevent accidents from happening. Right now, the real sword sect urgently needed to develop quietly. Some small fights were fine, but no major changes were allowed to happen. The 7 great elders all moved out and tried their best to seal the fluctuations. As the 5 primordial qi clouds spun, it seemed like they were about to turn into a river of primordial qi and fall. They also let out a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, something unexpected happened. It was very bright, but there were countless stars shining in the blue sky. It looked very strange. This phenomenon shocked the 7 great elders. It also made the disciples of the real sword sect cry out in surprise, but they didn't understand what was going on. Heaven and earth phenomenon, could it be caused by the sect master? The 7 great elders' divine souls conversed, and they were all shocked. It actually caused the stars in daytime. It seems that it's not just the stars in daytime. There's also a starlight tide, as expected. After the stars in daytime appeared, strands of starlight seemed to come from beyond the sky. They flew and gathered into a stream, sweeping in from all directions. The dense starlight flickered with a magnificent light, as if it had turned into a sea of starlight. The stars in daytime was a type of phenomenon, and the starlight tide was an even greater phenomenon that originated from the stars in daytime. The 7 great elders realized that even if they attacked with all their might, they could only suppress the vast fluctuations by a few %. It was still very shocking. They couldn't help but feel a little terrified, afraid that they would attract the attention of an expert that they couldn't defeat. Sure enough, outside the Ancient Beast Mountain, a few saint-level cultivators sensed the powerful ripples and came over out of curiosity. The 6 grand elders released their powerful spiritual energy to warn the approaching saint-level cultivators. After weighing the pros and cons, the saint-level experts knew that they were not his opponent, so they retreated. However, before long, an extremely powerful spirit energy swept past and surged over. Even the 7 great elders were no match for it. The 7 great elders' faces changed drastically. The thing that they feared the most had still happened. That tyrannical soul power swept through everything in an unparalleled manner. It surged into the great hall of the sect and headed straight for Chu Mu, as if it wanted to investigate what was going on. After circling around Chu Mu, the divine soul did not do anything malicious. It only glanced at him curiously before quickly leaving. Sensing the departure of the powerful divine soul, the 7 great elders let out a sigh of relief. Their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. If that divine soul had attacked, they wouldn't have been able to block it. Chu Mu would definitely have been destroyed. They felt extremely fortunate. It had to be said that Chu Mu's luck was quite good. He had narrowly escaped death. He originally thought that breaking through in the true sword sect would be very safe. The Ancient Beast Mountain was not prosperous, so there were few experts. Moreover, the true sword sect had a great elder, so there was no need to worry. He had never thought that something like this would happen. In fact, the owner of that tyrannical spiritual energy was an expert who was passing by. He had only released his spiritual energy to investigate when he saw the strange phenomenon in the sky. However, that expert was also very lucky. He had no ill intentions. If he had ill intentions and attacked Chu Mu, Bai Ling, who was in the true sword sect's spiritual seal, would not have let him go. Chu Mu had no idea about this. He was fully focused on breaking through, preparing to reconstruct his dantian and body. With the help of his powerful divine sense, he began to reconstruct his dantian. Above him, countless starlight gathered, shattering the 5 heaven and earth origin chi clouds. The starlight merged with the heaven and earth origin chi clouds, forming a huge nebula vortex more than 100 miles wide. It's huge! It's amazing! This was the first time they had seen such a breakthrough phenomenon. Everyone was shocked and exclaimed. The huge nebula vortex, the heaven and earth origin chi mixed with the power of the starlight, poured down like a rotating pillar to the sky. Powerful and pure energy poured into Chu Mu's shattered flesh and dantian. His dantian began to rapidly reconstruct. The wood aspect origin also absorbed the power of the starlight origin chi and continued to grow. It also fed back a powerful vitality into the reconstructed dantian, increasing the vitality of his dantian. Even if his dantian was injured in the future, it would be able to heal faster. Not long after, an even more powerful dantian full of vitality was reconstructed. Next, it was time to reconstruct his internal organs. Step by step, he would reconstruct his body from the inside out. This was a process that required caution and could not be rushed. This was the 5th nirvana, so Chu Mu was familiar with the process. An even more powerful body, from the inside out, was being reconstructed bit by bit under the power of Chu Mu's divine sense. The nebula vortex, which was 100 miles wide, quickly shrank and finally disappeared without a trace. The blue sky was still the same, as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. However, everyone knew that it wasn't an illusion. Therefore, each and every one of them was still immersed in shock, unable to extricate themselves. Yet, the image of sect master Chu Mu was deeply engraved in everyone's hearts. Unknowingly, everyone's respect for Chu Mu had risen beyond imagination. All of this was the effect of Chu Mu's breakthrough in the sect. He was unaware of it. After his body was reconstructed, Chu Mu did not leave the spiritual pool. Instead, he continued to cultivate in the spiritual pool. The spiritual pool water still contained a lot of spiritual chi, which could be used to consolidate his cultivation after his breakthrough and improve it as much as possible. 2 days later, the spiritual chi of the spiritual pool water was completely absorbed by Chu Mu. Not only did Chu Mu consolidate his cultivation, but he also raised his chi cultivation to the middle of the 5th sky of Nirvana realm. Chapter 1344. This breakthrough, including the time spent consolidating his cultivation, took a total of 7 days. Chu Mu's cultivation had undergone a huge breakthrough, rising from the early stage of the 4th heaven of Nirvana stage to the middle stage of the 5th heaven of Nirvana stage. The side effect was that the entire True Sword sect was sincerely convinced by him, the new sect master. This was something that Chu Mu did not expect. With a huge breakthrough in his cultivation, Chu Mu saw the enormous use of the spirit pool. Unfortunately, every time he used the spirit pool, it consumed too much energy. Although he was the sect master, he couldn't wantonly use the sect's resources to satisfy his needs. He had to think of the sect more. After putting away the spirit pool, Chu Mu patrolled around the sect, and also headed towards the sword crafting valley to see how to forge the sword. After that, he even personally called the disciples of the sword crafting valley, and some of the sword forging techniques and so on, causing the disciples to be extremely shocked. Too powerful! So not only is our sect master talented and powerful, he also has such profound attainments in sword forging. The disciples of the sword crafting valley all turned their admiration and reverence towards Chu Mu, like a torrential river, like a towering mountain that was unfathomable. The disciples of the sword crafting valley were the best at forging swords, and what they were most proud of was also the art of forging swords. Their cultivation was profound and powerful, and they could obtain their respect, but they could not obtain their admiration. This was also human nature, and only by suppressing the other party in the path that they were most proficient in and proud of, would they be able to make them admire and respect them. This was another unintentional move that had an unexpected effect. Chu Mu's mind stirred, and after leaving the sword crafting valley, he headed towards the treasure pill pavilion. First, Chu Mu observed how the disciples concocted pills. When he discovered that the disciples' pill concocting skills were rather ordinary or even crude, Chu Mu gave them some pointers. Furthermore, he personally concocted a cauldron of pills in front of the treasure pill pavilion disciples. As he concocted pills, he skillfully explained and taught them pill concocting skills and so on. After leaving the treasure pill pavilion, Chu Mu's image in the hearts of the treasure pill pavilion's disciples was infinitely high. Very soon, the disciples of the true sword sect all learned that not only was their sect master incredibly talented and powerful, but he was also skilled in sword forging and alchemy. He was so talented that the disciples secretly called him the unparalleled divine sect. This represented the unique status Chu Mu held in the hearts of the disciples. After patrolling the area, he headed to the sect master's private cultivation room. He took out the sword sect spirit seal and entered it once more. The white-clothed swordsman from the first test started fighting again. Compared to before, Chu Mu's swordsmanship had improved a little. He was even more tyrannical. In the fierce battle with the white-robed sword artist, the latter's swordsmanship was still as light and graceful as before. Each of his sword strikes were light but incomparably tyrannical. Chu Mu did not dare to face them head-on. With a chi sound, the sword light was peerless, and Chu Mu was defeated once again. Although he was defeated, Chu Mu was not dispirited in the slightest. That was because he had improved every time. If he lost, he would regain his composure, adjust himself, and fight again. In one day, Chu Mu had fought more than 10 times. In 5 days, after nearly 100 battles, Chu Mu realized that he seemed to have reached a bottleneck. No matter how many times he fought, he was unable to level up. He simply came out of seclusion, patrolled the area, and then headed towards the sword crafting valley. After Chu Mu's guidance a few days ago, a few disciples' attainments in sword forging had improved slightly. After making a trip to the treasure pill pavilion, he went to the mountains to enjoy the scenery. The wind blew the leaves, the clouds moved, and he relaxed his body and mind, forgetting about all kinds of cultivation. At some point in time, Zhang Xian's interest was piqued. He stretched out his hand, and a flexible branch flew into his hand. Holding it in his right hand, he flicked his wrist, and with a buzz, the branch suddenly straightened. Vaguely, there was a sharp glint in it. The branch was like a sword, dancing in Chu Mu's hands. Whether it was stabbing, chopping, or sweeping, the soft branches were like fine steel. The power of each sword strike was astonishing, and the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Chu Mu did not use any sword energy, nor did he inject any sword energy into it. He only used his sword technique. The soft branch seemed to have no weight at all, and was extremely light. Suddenly, he slashed out with his sword, causing the sound of thunder to explode and the sound of the wind to surge. Unknowingly, Chu Mu seemed to have returned to the time when he was fighting with the white-clothed swordsman. With a pause sound, the soft branch could no longer withstand the pressure and shattered. Chu Mu also stopped. Scene after scene of enlightenment flashed through his mind. Vaguely, Chu Mu seemed to have caught a glimpse of a flash of inspiration. He was calm and focused, neither arrogant nor impatient. The mountain breeze blew, and time passed. Unknowingly, Chu Mu had been standing in place for a long time. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes. They were as sharp as swords as they cut through the sky, leaving behind an astonishing sharpness in the air. A feeling of complete comprehension surged into his heart and lingered around him. I understand now. The Tao is divided into two extremes. The light to the extreme is heavy. Xiao Qin muttered with an indescribable excitement and agitation in his voice. After a moment of enlightenment, Chu Mu quickly left and entered the secret room for seclusion once more, entering the sword sect's spiritual seal once more. Sword, come. Xiao Qin clenched his hand, and a sword appeared out of thin air. He slashed out with his sword. It was as light as a feather, like the branches of a willow swaying in the wind. However, it contained a unique charm that it did not possess before. The white-clothed swordsman also slashed out with his sword. It was still as light and graceful as before. With a "pa" sound, the seemingly light and graceful sword collided with the white-clothed swordsman's sword. However, the instant it collided with the white-clothed swordsman's sword, an unimaginable power erupted. It was as if it was not a light and graceful sword but an incomparably heavy pillar. For the first time, Chu Mu did not fall into a disadvantage when the two swords clashed head-on. This was a good start. Without any hesitation, Xiao Qin slashed out with his sword again. After comprehending the two extremes of the Tao, Chu Mu's sword mastery increased once again. From Deshang's one with the sword, it directly increased to perfection. In an intense battle with the white-clothed swordsman, they were evenly matched. Without being suppressed, Chu Mu could now divert some of his attention to study his opponent's sword art and think of a countermeasure. The sword moved in a circle, circling in front of Xiao Qin. It was like a circle with no beginning and no end. The light and graceful sword aura contained a shockingly heavy power. The white-clothed swordsman's sword was sucked into the circle, unable to unleash its full power. Suddenly, the sword light flashed and was pulled out of the circle. It was like a sword being pulled out of its scabbard. The terrifying sharpness was unparalleled. The sword evolved to the extreme, like lightning. With a slight poochie sound, the white-clothed swordsman did not have time to dodge. Chu Mu's shocking sword pierced through his throat, killing him instantly. The white-clothed swordsman disappeared. In the vast expanse of whiteness, the scenery changed. In front of Xiao Qin, a throne appeared. On the throne, there was a tall figure in a purple-gold dragon robe. He was majestic and domineering. His aura was like that of an emperor who ruled over the world. His gaze was cold and arrogant, looking down on Xiao Qin as if he was looking at an ant. Not bad, you can pass the second trial. However, the second trial will be your end, the purple-gold-robed man said. His voice carried an inexplicable pressure, making Chu Mu feel like he was a subject. Pulling out the purple-gold sword beside the throne, the emperor stood up. His powerful and domineering aura surged out, subduing the enemy without even fighting. Step by step, the emperor's aura continued to increase. When he got close to Chu Mu, he raised the purple-gold sword and slashed down. Different from the white-clothed swordsman's lightness, this sword was direct and simple. However, it contained the emperor's domineering aura. It was as if the world would submit under this sword. A sharp light flashed in Chu Mu's eyes. He didn't dodge. The sword in his hand transformed into a beam of light and slashed out. The emperor's purple-gold sword was unleashed. Under the heavens, all the land belonged to the emperor. The emperor's sword was extremely domineering. Those who didn't submit would die. Chu Mu's sword seemed to be beyond the mortal world. It wasn't bound by etiquette. It was free and unrestrained. Xiao Qin dodged again and again, clashed again and again. The emperor's purple-gold sword was extremely domineering. Every move was simple, but the aura it contained made it hard for others to resist. If it was a swordsman who wasn't as good as Chu Mu, facing this emperor, he wouldn't even need to use his sword. Just the emperor's aura alone would be enough to suppress his opponent. Chu Mu's sword mastery increased. He was evenly matched with the emperor. After fighting for a long time, the emperor let out a roar. It was as if he was enraged. His aura increased tremendously as he slashed out with his sword. When the emperor was angry, millions of corpses would fall. This sword and this move were the essence of the Emperor's sword skills. Chu was shocked. He realized that he couldn't dodge this sword. Everything around him was under the control of the Emperor's sword. It was as if the Emperor's subordinates had to accept the Emperor's judgment. He took it head-on. With a boom, the sword shook violently. It couldn't block the attack and was broken apart. The power didn't decrease at all. Kill. Chu Mu's vision turned black. Intense pain spread throughout his body. He knew that he was going to be killed. The Emperor's last sword was too powerful. It couldn't be blocked. Chu Mu wasn't depressed. Just like before, he was able to defeat the white-clothed swordsman. After that, he would be able to defeat the Emperor. Although he defeated the white-clothed swordsman, there were still things that he could learn from the white-clothed swordsman's sword skills. After that, he went back to the battle with the Emperor. After that, he started to practice his sword skills. As expected, his sword skills improved. After practicing a few times, he entered the sword sect spiritual seal again and fought with the Emperor again. The purple gold Emperor's final attack was executed and Chu Mu was killed once again. Chu Mu knew that if he couldn't break the Emperor's last sword, it would be useless no matter how many times he fought with the Emperor. After coming out of seclusion, nothing big happened in the real sword sect. On the contrary, all the disciples were working hard in their cultivation. It was like a raging fire. Chu Mu started to think about whether he should hold a sect competition to further stimulate the disciples' passion for cultivation. It would make cultivation more meaningful and meaningful. After thinking for a while, Chu Mu felt that it was a good idea. He immediately summoned Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He and told them about his idea. When Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He heard it, they started to think. Speaking of which, our sword sect hasn't held a sect competition for many years. Looking at the current situation, we can indeed hold one. Yun Feng said. Sect leader's idea is feasible. Yun He thought for a while and said with certainty. Since they felt that it was feasible, the three of them started to discuss when to hold it, how to hold it, the rewards and so on. Chapter 1345. Chu Mu and Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He carried out a simple discussion. After constructing a complete framework for the sect great competition, Chu Mu became a hands-off shopkeeper and handed over the details of the sect great competition to Elder Yun Feng and Elder He to handle. As for Chu Mu himself, he was wholeheartedly comprehending the sword art. He was trying his best to decipher the Emperor of Purple Gold's ultimate move. Only by deciphering that move would he be able to resist or even defeat the Emperor of Purple Gold. Apart from cultivating, Chu Mu had some free time to organize his collection. He planned to take out some of his personal treasures as rewards for the intersect tournament. When he was organizing his collection, Chu Mu once again looked at the crystal coffin and the person inside. She was still in a deep sleep. In fact, Chu Mu didn't know whether she was still alive or not. He couldn't open the crystal coffin either. He took out another piece of paper. It was an incomplete secret manual that he had won previously. There was only one move on it, and it was called the Eternal Sword Force. Chu Mu had tried to comprehend the Eternal Sword Force before, but he didn't get anything out of it. It was too profound, or maybe he didn't find the right path. Now that he was reading it again, Chu Mu didn't expect to be able to comprehend anything. Unexpectedly, after reading it once, he suddenly had a strange feeling. It was as if he understood a little bit. This discovery surprised Chu Mu, and he quickly focused on reading it. He read it over and over again, comprehending it over and over again. Gradually, Chu Mu's heart had a layer of understanding. It was as if he was about to understand something, but he was always lacking a little bit. It was as if there was a layer of membrane between him, and it was as if he could pierce through this membrane to see the true picture. Although he had a feeling that he was about to comprehend it, he was still unable to do so. Chu Mu had to give up temporarily. However, he vaguely understood that increasing the realm of his sword art would be of direct help in comprehending the Eternal Sword Force. Now, His swordsmanship realm was at the consummate realm of the union of man and sword, but it was just the beginning. His swordsmanship realm had increased by a small realm, and his mastery and understanding of swordsmanship had obviously increased by a lot. If he could break through the union of man and sword and reach the next realm of swordsmanship, he might be able to comprehend the essence of the eternal sword momentum. Cultivating, comprehending, and practicing swordsmanship had become a daily necessity for Chu Mu. Elder Yun, 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 Elder Yun and Elder Yun had also reached a conclusion and reported it to Chu Mu. After reading it, Chu Mu immediately made a decision. The great sect competition was set to be held in a month, and this news was immediately spread. When the true sword sect's disciples heard about it, they were all quite startled before becoming overjoyed. The last great sect competition had been held many years ago. With competition, there would be pressure and motivation. The disciples who had been cultivating fervently to begin with began to work even harder. Under this atmosphere, all the disciples were filled with motivation. Yun Feng continued to collect information, but there was no progress on the information regarding the 18 god races. There was only some superficial information. Perhaps it was because the true sword sect's level was not high enough, but the fifth supreme elder was unable to think of any useful information, which made Chu Mu feel quite helpless. However, it was impossible to make something out of nothing. There was nothing Chu Mu could do about this. He could only put aside the secret of the 18 god pearls for now and focus on increasing his own strength. Only with enough strength would he be able to better explore the secret. Otherwise, even if he knew, he would not be able to keep it. He knew that he was not the only one who was paying attention to the 18 god pearls. There were definitely people stronger than him. Unraveling the secrets of the sword sect spirit mark, increasing his cultivation and strength, and developing the true sword sect were his main tasks at this stage. During this month, not only were the true sword sect's disciples working hard to cultivate, Chu Mu was not idle either. His efforts were not inferior to any of the disciples. During this period, Chu Mu entered the sword sect spirit mark again and fought with the Emperor of Zijin many times. Although he was defeated every time, Chu Mu was able to last longer each time. From time to time, he would even take out the eternal sword force to comprehend it. Although he was still unable to unravel the secrets within it, the realm of his swordsmanship was increasing bit by bit. Suddenly, Chu Mu had an epiphany. If he was strong enough, then no matter what the opponent's methods were, he would be able to unravel them in the end. After understanding this, Chu Mu was even more conscious to increase the realm of his swordsmanship, instead of trying to unravel the Emperor of Zijin's swordsmanship killer moves. This was the true path of the king. The path was divided into two extremes, the extreme of ease and the extreme of heaviness. Chu Mu's understanding of this was also increasing. The white-robed swordsman's light and graceful swordsmanship was fully absorbed by Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu was different from the white-robed swordsman. Hence, his swordsmanship was imprinted with Chu Mu's personal style and had his own unique style. The realm of one with the sword continued to consolidate and increase. Within the sword sect spirit mark, Chu Mu faced the Emperor of Zijin once again. I have said that the second stage is your final stage. The Emperor of Zijin once again pulled out his sword and walked down from his throne. His aura was shocking, and the might of the Emperor was shocking. He slashed out with his sword, and the might of the Emperor was biting cold. The four seas bowed down, and the 8 directions bowed respectfully. Chu Mu was very familiar with the Emperor of Zijin's swordsmanship after fighting with him many times. He immediately countered it. Once again, both sides were unable to defeat each other. In the end, the Emperor of Zijin used his terrifying emperor-slaying sword again. Chu Mu had died many times under this sword, and he had a deep understanding of it. When the Emperor of Zijin's sword was raised, he was very cautious. However, Chu Mu already had a way to counter it. It was just that he wasn't sure if it would work in theory. However, at least he could give it a try. After dying, he could come back again. This was his greatest advantage. His sharp senses told him that when the Emperor of Zijin's sword was raised and was about to use the Emperor's slaying sword, there would be a very short time gap. It was a time for him to accumulate his strength and aura. With the Emperor of Zijin's swordsmanship realm, he could use his own ability to cover up this small gap. Moreover, in a battle of life and death, how many people could truly grasp this gap? Chu Mu grasped it. This time, the sword drew a circle in front of him. Under the circle, there was a shocking mystery. Lightness and heaviness intertwined, causing this sword to have an indescribable strangeness. The power exploded, and the sword advanced. The originally light and heavy sword suddenly turned into an aurora. It was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. The sword light pierced through the void. It pierced through time and space, and went straight towards the Emperor of Zijin's Emperor-slaying sword. The sword light was extremely condensed. It was so light that it seemed to be weightless. However, it contained an incomparably heavy power. As the power intertwined, it became vigorous and domineering. It actually gave birth to a trace of the Emperor-slaying sword's power. Millions of corpses, the common people are ant. Hit. Chu Mu's sword light pierced through the huge purple-gold sword light and the Emperor of Zijin's forehead. At the same time, half of the purple-gold sword light also slashed towards Chu Mu, killing Chu Mu. This ending could be said to be mutual destruction. Chu Mu once again entered the sword sect spiritual seal. The throne and the Emperor of Zijin had both disappeared. There was only a vast expanse of white. Could it be that I've passed the second stage? Chu Mu was astonished. At this moment, the white expanse of white around him started to change. Traces of black seemed to extend out from the void and spread out. It was like ink splattering out from an ink bottle. Very quickly, it covered everything around him and dyed the white expanse into darkness. It was pitch black and silent. Suddenly, it gave Chu Mu a deep and lonely feeling. It was very strange. The strange atmosphere spread out and Chu Mu became alert. Could it be the third stage? Chu Mu couldn't help but guess. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. A pitch-black sword light seemed to have appeared in the darkness. It merged into one with the darkness. He couldn't look at it directly or feel it. Just as Chu Mu sensed it, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. His vision quickly fell into darkness. He was dead. As expected, it's the third stage. However, I died in an instant. This is too. In the secret cultivation room, Chu Mu couldn't help but smile bitterly. He hadn't even seen his opponent's figure, but he had been killed in a single strike. Compared to the previous two stages, the difference was far, far too great. After thinking for a while, he came up with nothing. Chu Mu refused to give up and entered the sword sect spiritual seal again. This time, he directly appeared in darkness. It was quiet and lonely, and he couldn't see anything. Chu Mu raised his vigilance as much as he could to guard against any attacks. Sure enough, under full defense, he felt a trace of a strange and sharp ripple piercing towards his heart from behind. Chu Mu immediately reacted to dodge, but he was still a bit too slow and was pierced through from behind. His heart was shattered and he died again. After thinking for a while, he entered again, but he was still instantly killed. After a few more times, Chu Mu couldn't help but give up for now. He began to think deeply. The Yang clan had developed for several hundred years, and they could be considered to have a certain foundation. However, after being extorted by the True Sword sect for 70% of their collection, their foundation had plummeted. This was a huge blow to the Yang clan. For a period of time after that, the Yang clan's disciples were no longer as vigorous as before. This caused the Yang clan's upper echelons to hate the True Sword sect to the bone. Not only had they plundered the Yang clan's hard-earned wealth, but they had also struck a blow to the Yang clan's disciples' confidence. Moreover, the Yang clan's wealth had shrunk so much that they had no choice but to slow down their cultivation of their disciples. This had delayed the Yang clan's development. In short, the True Sword sect was extremely detestable in the eyes of the Yang clan. However, they were bound to be strong. If they hadn't agreed at that time, the Yang clan would have been in great trouble. They could only compromise for now. The Yang clan had been waiting for an opportunity, and that was the only remaining great ancestor of the Yang clan. According to seniority, the great ancestor was the grandfather of the current Yang clan head's grandfather. He was over 500 years old, and was the only remaining ancestor of the Yang clan. A few years ago, he had entered seclusion to break through to the immemorial realm. The Yang clan had been waiting for his return. If Yang Gaozu failed to break through, the Yang clan would naturally swallow their anger. However, if he succeeded and became a saint, it would be time for them to settle the score with the True Sword sect. At that time they would take back what they had lost 2, 3, or even 10 times. Now, the upper echelons of the Yang clan were very happy and excited. Yang Gaozu had successfully broken through to the immemorial realm and become a saint. The Yang clan now had a pillar of support, and their foundation had strengthened greatly. With Yang Gaozu going to the True Sword sect, the True Sword sect's people would have to pay a heavy price for their arrogance. Chapter 1346. A powerful aura filled the sky as a figure soared into the sky from the Yang family's ancestral house, turning into a streak of light. It was as if a bolt of purple lightning had pierced through the universe, instantly disappearing into the distance. The tyrannical aura was still circling above the Yang family, as if announcing that he was an expert, the strongest expert of the Yang family, the guardian of the Yang family. The saint level of the eternal realm is really strong. That's right. Just this aura alone is enough to make me breathless. The Yang family's patriarch and elders were all excited. That's our great ancestor of the Yang family. Amazing, I don't know when I'll be able to reach that level. That's the eternal realm, the extremely powerful saint level. You won't be able to reach it even if you have 1,000 years. The Yang family's disciples were all in high spirits as they discussed. With the great ancestor taking action, the True Sword sect's good days are over. Isn't that so? How dare they rob us just because they're stronger than us? Now that the great ancestor has come out of seclusion, the True Sword sect's doomsday has arrived. I really want to go and see the great ancestor's might. Yang Gaozu turned into a streak of lightning and soared into the sky. Originally, it was a great thing that he had come out of seclusion and was worth celebrating, but he didn't expect to hear about the True Sword sect robbing them as soon as he came out, which made him furious. In his fury, he decided to personally go to the True Sword sect and teach them a lesson. And if the True Sword sect didn't know what was good for them, he didn't mind wiping them out with the might of a saint. The speed of a saint was unbelievably fast. Even a genius like Chu Mu couldn't reach 1/20th of Yang Gaozu's speed at full speed. The difference was too great. It was as if a real bolt of lightning had streaked across the sky, leaving the Yang family and rapidly heading towards the ancient Beast Mountain, approaching the True Sword sect. As if to show his might as a saint, Yang Gaozu didn't restrain his aura. Instead, he deliberately released his aura. Before he arrived, the terrifying aura of a saint-level expert had already swept over, immediately alarming the disciples of the True Sword sect. What a terrifying aura! What's going on? This aura is even stronger than the elders. The entire True Sword sect was alarmed. Yun Feng and Yun He's faces suddenly changed drastically. In the True Sword sect, aside from the great elders, their cultivations were the highest, so they could sense it the clearest. Within the cultivation room, Chu Mu didn't feel any aura fluctuations because the cultivation room had the ability to isolate auras. However, Yun Feng and Yun He quickly came over and called out to Chu Mu. As soon as Chu Mu left the secret cultivation room, he immediately felt a tyrannical aura surge towards him. He had come into contact with many saint-level powerhouses, so he was very clear that this was the fluctuation of a saint-level powerhouse. However, he felt that there was a big gap between it and the Supreme Elders. He's not here with good intentions. This time, I'll have to trouble the Supreme Elder to take action, Chu-Mu said faintly. He could feel a sense of hostility from this aura. It seemed that the visitor did not know that the True Sword sect had a saint-level expert overseeing it. Bringing Yun Feng and Yun He outside, he ordered the disciples to stay put and not run around. Then, he flew into the sky. A bolt of purple light rapidly approached, and the aura was getting stronger and stronger. "Who are you?" Chu-Mu asked. Yun Feng and Yun He couldn't bear the pressure of a saint-level expert's aura. They could only resist with all their might, barely managing to stabilize themselves. They didn't even have the ability to speak. However, their sect master, whose cultivation was lower than theirs, didn't seem to be affected at all. This made them even more shocked. The great ancestor of the Yang family is here today to seek justice. It was like a sudden clap of thunder, rumbling and roaring. It was frightening. Chu-Mu and the elders were all shocked. They didn't expect the small Yang family to have a saint-rank expert. Chu-Mu thought even more. His thoughts turned in an instant and he guessed a bit of the truth. When he went to the Yang family, they didn't resist and were very cooperative. At that time, Yang Gaozu, a saint-level expert, was definitely not in the Yang family. It could even be said that Yang Gaozu wasn't a saint-level expert at that time, so the Yang family didn't have the confidence and could only cooperate. Now that Yang Gaozu had successfully broken through to the Eternal Realm and become a saint-level expert, it was time to counterattack. Chu-Mu himself didn't realize that ever since he entered the sword sect spirit imprint and fought again and again, as his sword technique realm increased, his thinking ability and speed also increased quite a bit. "So it's Senior Yang. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. Senior, please come in." Chu-Mu smiled. "Let's go." Yang Gaozu's tone was arrogant. He was bold and powerful, but he wasn't in a hurry to settle the score. He looked like he wanted to see what the other party was up to. Indeed, the gap between a saint-level expert and a Nirvana realm expert was huge. Even if there was a conspiracy, Yang Gaozu wasn't afraid. He didn't know that what awaited him wasn't a conspiracy, but absolute power. As soon as they entered the main hall, Yang Gaozu was so pleased with himself that he directly sat on the sect master's seat and looked down. "Not bad, this seat." Sitting down, Yang Gaozu said in a judgmental tone, which made Yun Feng He and Yun Yunyun's expressions change drastically. They pulled out their swords and pointed at him. "Get down. This is the sect master's seat. It's not your turn to sit there. A mere fifth sky of Nirvana realm cultivator can be the sect master. Your true sword sect really has no one." Yang Gaozu smiled coldly. He wasn't afraid of the threat at all. In his eyes, Yun Feng and Yun He were only at the seventh sky of Nirvana realm. They were just two slightly bigger ants that could be destroyed with a flick of his finger. "Senior Yang, what business do you have in our sect? Just say it." Chu-Mu didn't care and said indifferently. "Nothing big. I just heard that not long ago, the sect master took the disciples of the True Sword sect to the Yang family and took away a large amount of the Yang family's wealth. Our Yang family is just a small family and can't compare to a colossus like the True Sword sect. That wealth was accumulated by the Yang family over hundreds of years." Yang Gaozu's tone was cold and angry. "In Senior's opinion, what should we do?" Chu-Mu smiled faintly and asked in return. "I'm very fair. You took away 70% of the Yang family's wealth, so take out 80% of the True Sword sect's wealth. 70% will be returned and 10% will be used as compensation. In this way, the Yang family and the True Sword sect can coexist peacefully." Yang Gaozu said expressionlessly. Yun Feng He was even angrier when he heard this, but Chu-Mu waved his hand, telling them to calm down. Speaking of which, if the true sword sect's strength was only at this level, Yang Gaozu's goal this time would most likely succeed. But once the true sword sect compromised, they would most likely gradually become a vassal of the Yang family. Yang Gaozu's intentions were punishable. Grand Elder, this time, I can only rely on you, Chu Mu said, as if he was talking to the void. Yang Gaozu's heart suddenly trembled, and a bad feeling rose in his heart. Although his strength far surpassed Chu Mu and the others, he wasn't stupid. The moment he felt something was wrong, even if he didn't know the source of it, he didn't hesitate. His body moved, and he instantly transformed into a bolt of lightning. In an instant, he left the sect master's seat and charged towards the Great Hall. He planned on breaking through the Great Hall and immediately leaving. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. Just as Yang Gaozu was about to reach the roof of the main hall, an incomparably powerful aura swept across the sky, locking onto Yang Gaozu. That aura was incomparably sharp, like an unsheathed divine sword that could kill gods and demons. Its power was unparalleled. Yang Gaozu's body froze, and his face changed drastically. His eyes shone with shock. Strong, too strong. Compared to him, this sharp aura was many times stronger. A mere first heavenly layer of the Aeon dares to behave atrociously in the true sword sect? You really don't know the meaning of death. An old but vigorous voice rang out, and the sharpness in it caused Yang Gaozu's heart to palpitate. Say. Yang Gaozu's heart trembled and his soul trembled. The difference was too great, too great. Under this aura, all his resistance was useless. The person who made the move was the third elder. His cultivation base was at the fourth heavenly layer of the Aeon realm, much higher than the first heavenly layer of the Aeon realm. The difference between the Aeon realm was far greater than the difference between the Nirvana realm. The difference between each heavenly layer could be 100 times greater. Sect Master, how should we deal with him? A figure flickered, appearing in the main hall. Yang Gaozu was horrified. He never would have thought that there would be such an expert hidden within the true sword sect. A holy ranker who was much stronger than him gave Yang Gaozu the feeling that the other party could kill him with a single finger. Regret. Yang Gaozu regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Why couldn't he just stay in seclusion after breaking through to the saint level? Why did he have to come to the true sword sect to look for trouble? And now, trouble had come looking for him, and it was super big trouble. He couldn't even cry. Kill him. Chu Mu had just said 3 words when Yang Gaozu's heart trembled. He was extremely shocked. No one wanted to die like this. It's a pity. Chu Mu's words made Yang Gaozu heave a sigh of relief. If we don't kill him, it'll be troublesome if we let him go, said Chu Mu. Yang Gaozu really wanted to say that as long as they let him go back, he definitely wouldn't dare to provoke them again. He would also strictly order the Yang family not to provoke the true sword sect. Unfortunately, under the third supreme elder's aura, he couldn't speak. Third elder, do you have any way to control this person and make him work for the true sword sect? Chu Mu asked. He was thinking from the sect master's point of view. The 7 elders weren't suitable to appear in public to avoid being known by their enemies. However, the true sword sect didn't have enough experts. Although Yang Gaozu wasn't as strong as the elders, he was still a saint. He was stronger than a Nirvana realm expert. If they could be used by the true sword sect and serve the true sword sect wholeheartedly, they would be able to increase the true sword sect's strength, and there would be no need for the great elders to act. I don't know how to do that, but I can ask the 5th elder, the 3rd elder replied. Yang Gaozu felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't resist. Chapter 1347. The 5th Supreme Elder was the most knowledgeable of the 7 Supreme Elders. If he didn't know, then most of the other Supreme Elders wouldn't know either. 5th Supreme Elder didn't disappoint Chu Mu. According to what he said, there really was a method to control Yang Gaozu. This method was called slave imprint. It was to plant one's own mental imprint in the opponent's mind to achieve the goal of controlling the opponent. I'm willing to swear allegiance to the real sword sect. Yang Gaozu made a solemn vow. Without the suppression of the Supreme Elders, he could speak, but with two Supreme Elders beside him, he didn't dare to show the slightest hostility. I don't believe it, Chu Mu said indifferently. You only have two choices. First, let go of your mind and let me plant a slave seal. Second, die here, and then it will be the end of the Yang clan. Two choices, one of them. It was a very simple, but also a very difficult choice. Yang Gaozu was silent, struggling in his heart. I choose one. After a long while, Yang Gaozu said, his voice full of frustration and bitterness. Speaking of which, he had broken through to the eternal realm with a cultivation of the seventh sky of Nirvana realm. Luck played a large part in that, so he was very happy. He felt that he could show his strength and lead the Yang clan to prosperity. After learning that the Yang clan was bullied by the real sword sect, he planned to find them and subdue the real sword sect to become a vassal of the Yang clan. But everything was different from what he had imagined. Yang Gaozu had no choice but to submit. He had come with such a fierce momentum, but in the blink of an eye, he had transformed from a vicious wolf into a lamb. This kind of transformation made people sigh endlessly. Yang Gaozu made his choice. Under the gaze of the two Supreme Elders, the pressure was great. He didn't dare to make the slightest movement and obediently opened his mind. Chu Mu condensed a mental seed. This method was called slave imprint and was taught to him by Fifth Supreme Elder just now. With Chu Mu's powerful comprehension, he was able to learn it in a few moments and was very familiar with it. Under the control of Chu Mu, the spiritual seed entered Yang Gaozu's completely open mind and planted a slave seal. Once the slave imprint was formed, Chu Mu and Yang Gaozu had a trace of a master-slave relationship. Yang Gaozu couldn't be disloyal. If he couldn't, he would trigger the spiritual seed and suffer pain. Chu Mu would be able to sense it, and he could directly detonate the spiritual seed and destroy Yang Gaozu's mind. The mind was not the soul, but it was also related to the soul. Once the mind was destroyed, the result would be death. It was the Grand Elder's idea to make Yang Gaozu Chu Mu's sword servant. It was true that Chu Mu was a genius, but his current level was still too low. With a saint-level expert by his side, his safety would be guaranteed. If one day, Chu Mu broke through to the eternal realm, Yang Gaozu would be of no use to him. At that time, he would have to make arrangements. After being sealed, Yang Gaozu seemed to have lost all his fighting spirit. It was as if he had become an old man in his twilight years, the kind that was waiting for death. You're very sensible. I can tell you clearly that when I break through to the eternal realm, I will release your slave imprint and set you free, Chu Mu said to Yang Gaozu. Firstly, when Chu Mu reached the eternal realm, Yang Gaozu would become an ant in his eyes. Secondly, Yang Gaozu's current state was very bad. He had no fighting spirit, and although he didn't have any rebellious thoughts, he was useless. Chu Mu gave him hope. Sure enough, when Yang Gaozu heard this, his dim eyes suddenly flashed. The lifespan of an eternal realm expert was extremely long. He could see that the sect master, who was only at the fifth sky of Nirvana realm, was not an ordinary Nirvana realm expert. He was a peerless genius, and advancing to the eternal realm was not a difficult task for a peerless genius like him. Perhaps in 100 years or even just a few decades, he would regain his freedom. With hope, his decadence was swept away. For the time being, you will be a guest elder of the true sword sect, Chu Mu said. Yes, sect master. Yang Gaozu quickly got into his role. The third supreme elder and the fifth supreme elder smiled and quickly left. The huge change stunned Yun Feng and Yun He. It took them a long time to react. Chu Mu asked them to spread the news that Yang Gaozu, a saint-level expert, had become a guest elder of the true sword sect and tell the disciples of the true sword sect. Firstly, it relieved them of their worries, and secondly, it strengthened their sense of belonging. The stronger the true sword sect was, the stronger their sense of glory would be, and the stronger their sense of belonging would be. When the disciples of the true sword sect found out that the saint-level expert who had attacked them with malicious intent had become a guest elder of the true sword sect, they felt incredulous at first, but then they were pleasantly surprised. This meant that the true sword sect had a saint-level expert overseeing it, and had become even stronger. The core disciples knew more, and vaguely felt that the Grand Elder had taken action and subdued the saint-level expert. No matter what, it was a good thing. Putting aside their worries, the disciples once again began to work hard for the upcoming sect grand competition. Chu Mu also released news that the top 3 of the sect grand competition would receive an additional reward. The reward would be personally given out by the sect master. As for the content of the reward, it would not be announced for the time being. Even so, it still gave the disciples more motivation. He entered the cultivation room again to cultivate. As for Yang Gaozu, Chu Mu told him to go back to the Yang family first and take care of things before coming to the true sword sect. Entering the sword sect spirit imprint again, he was insta-killed again. This made Chu Mu depressed, and he began to ponder deeply. If the sword sect spirit seals test was so difficult, it was no wonder that no one had been able to solve it for so many years. However, if the first and second tests were so difficult, why would the third test be so difficult? It didn't make sense. Such an increase in difficulty made it impossible for anyone to solve the secret. If that wasn't the case, then there must be something missing, resulting in a one-hit kill. After racking his brain, Chu Mu seemed to have an idea. He felt that the reason he was killed in one hit was because his reaction wasn't fast enough, affecting his 6 senses in the darkness. On the other hand, that assassin-like opponent came and went like a shadow, and his sword skills were known for being strange and unpredictable. If he could achieve a high level of unity in his essence, chi, and spirit, he might be able to fight and even pass the test. This time, Chu Mu was in no hurry to enter the sword sect spirit seal. Instead, he adjusted himself, striving to bring his essence, chi, and spirit to the peak, then unify them into one. After unifying his essence, chi, and spirit, Chu Mu had a sudden inspiration, as if he was struck by a stroke of good fortune, controlling his essence with his top high god rank sword intent. Entering the sword sect spirit seal and being immersed in darkness, Chu Mu's 6 senses were affected, becoming somewhat sluggish. Fortunately, after reaching the peak of his essence, chi, and spirit, Chu Mu's essence, chi, and spirit had reached a high level of unity. Moreover, he had a sudden inspiration, using his top high god rank sword intent to control his essence, bringing out an unprecedented peak state. The peak state of his consciousness made him feel like he was floating, as if his soul was floating in the air, transcending everything. As expected, under this state, the sudden attack was perceived by Chu Mu and he reacted swiftly. Dodging, he swung his sword. A snow-white sword light bloomed in the darkness, like a bolt of lightning. With one sword strike, Huang Xiaolong deflected the opponent's strange attack, but his attack missed. The testi suddenly disappeared. Chu Mu could only wait patiently. After exchanging blows again and again, Chu Mu fully understood the third test's swordsmanship. It could be said that the third test's testi was a strange sword grandmaster. Under the control of his sword intent, Chu Mu was able to react quickly, dodging, blocking, and counterattacking. Absorbing the essence of the opponent's swordsmanship, Chu Mu's swordsmanship became more flexible. After exchanging blows many times and becoming familiar with the opponent's style, Chu Mu found it easier to deal with the opponent's attack. On the other hand, the opponent's swordsmanship did not improve in the slightest. Stabbing out with his sword, Huang Xiaolong's wrist flicked, pushing the opponent's sword forward. The sticky force made the opponent unable to withdraw in time. In the blink of an eye, the sword in Huang Xiaolong's hand turned into a streak of light, piercing through the darkness. Chu Mu heard a muffled groan, and after a moment of silence, the darkness receded rapidly, replaced by a vast expanse of whiteness. He knew that he had passed the third test. From the looks of it, there was still a fourth test. As the vast expanse of whiteness faded away, a bamboo forest appeared. A fresh and refreshing smell assaulted Huang Xiaolong's face. As the wind blew, long and narrow bamboo leaves slowly drifted down. From the depths of the bamboo forest, a person walked out. He was dressed in green and seemed to be one with the bamboo forest. He looked very slow, but in reality, every step he took was dozens of meters. Not long after, he arrived in front of Chu Mu. With every step he took, a fierce aura would rise up from his body. It grew stronger and stronger until it reached Chu Mu. It was as if the fierceness had reached its peak. Without saying a word, the green-clothed swordsman drew his sword. His sword was like a bamboo leaf. As he slashed out, the thin sword edge cut through the void at an extremely fast speed. What was even more shocking was that the green-clothed swordsman's sharpness had reached its peak and exploded. It gathered in the green bamboo sword, shocking the world with its sharpness. Before the sword arrived, Chu Mu already felt like he was being cut apart by this sharpness. Even his mind felt pain. When the sword came out, Chu Mu did not dodge. Under the control of the sword intent, his sword technique stabbed out in a very strange way. The green-clothed swordsman and Chu Mu fought fiercely. For a moment the two were equally matched. What was surprising was that the battle between the two was extremely fierce. The sword light was astonishing. The sharpness of the sword light shot up into the sky as if it could break the void. However, the surrounding green bamboo was not affected at all. Was the green bamboo fake? It could be fake, but it could also be real. However, why was it not damaged at all under the fierce sword light of the two? Was it because the green bamboo was too tough, so tough that the sword light of the two could not damage it? No, the real reason was that the two of them had reached an astonishing level of control over their strength. One with the sword. One with the sword. One with the sword. One with the sword. The sword in one's hand was an extension of one's arm, as if it had grown out of one's arm. When Chu Mu's one with the sword reached perfection, this feeling was even more profound. However, as the battle became more and more intense, the collision of the two swords sent out a terrifying force that was no longer under the control of the two of them. It began to cause damage to the surroundings. Chapter 1348. The green bamboo garden was a beautiful place with a refreshing and unique sense of beauty. But at this moment, everything was destroyed, and the culprits were these two people. The fierce battle reached its climax. The terrifying sword light was invincible, nothing could stop it, nothing could stop it. Neither Chu Mu nor the green-robed swordsman deliberately controlled their strength, it was almost an instinct. Both of them could control their strength perfectly, but the shock waves from the collision of their swords were not affected by them. Of course, if they wanted to, they could also control their strength, but it would be more troublesome and disadvantageous to them. To the two of them, the green bamboo garden was merely a virtual environment. No matter how beautiful it was useless. The sword technique and sword of the green-clothed swordsman only had one characteristic, and that was sharpness, extreme sharpness, indestructible sharpness. The thin sword blade had an incomparably terrifying sharpness that could cut through all hard nothingness. The pure sharpness left a deep impression on Chu Mu. For a moment, he almost thought that this was swordsmanship. Compared to the green-robed swordsman, Chu Mu's swordsmanship not only had sharpness, but was also graceful, heavy, strange, domineering, and so on. However, when Chu Mu displayed his swordsmanship, each sword could only have one style. After a long battle, the green-robed swordsman took out his ultimate move, killing sword, thrusting his sword forward. The sword tip alternated with the sword edge's slash, allowing the sword to cut through space with the smallest margin, tearing through all obstacles. Its speed reached its peak, and its sharpness was several times stronger than before. What a terrifying killing sword, unparalleled power. Chu Mu's heart tightened, his expression turned solemn as he prepared for battle. Under the control of his top high god rank sword intent, he could feel the exquisiteness and sharpness of this sword strike. That kind of terror made his heart tremble. However, ever since he had a flash of inspiration, controlling all forces with his top high god rank sword intent, his consciousness had undergone a subtle change, becoming more sensitive and direct, able to sense the changes in his surroundings more intuitively. If it was before, Chu Mu wouldn't have been able to dodge this sword, and he would have died. But now, Chu Mu had dodged it, even though he was in a sorry state and his robe was torn. After unleashing such a powerful strike, the green-clothed swordsman's body paused for a brief moment. This pause was keenly captured by Chu Mu. In retaliation, the sword light cut through the sky like a meteor or lightning. It was fierce and fast. In an instant, it had crossed dozens of meters and appeared in front of the green-clothed swordsman. For the first time, the green-clothed swordsman's sharp eyes showed shock. The timing of this sword strike was too perfect. It was difficult to dodge. The azure-clothed swordsman barely managed to raise his sword to counterattack, but he was still too slow. Chu Mu's sword cut off his head. Fourth trial passed. It could be said that this fourth trial was the fastest among the 4 trials that Chu Mu had passed, but it didn't mean that the fourth trial was the easiest. On the contrary, the fourth trial was the most difficult. The main reason was that Chu Mu's sword skills had improved, and his sword skill realm had improved. On top of that, in a flash of inspiration, he had comprehended how to control all forces with his sword intent, raising his awareness and sharpening his senses. Thus, he was able to dodge the attack by a hair's breadth and catch the fleeting moment of opportunity to counterattack. After passing the fourth trial, everything disappeared, and the vast expanse of whiteness reappeared. Chu Mu wondered if there would be a 5th trial, and what kind of opponent he would face in the 5th trial. The scenery reappeared, surprising Chu Mu. This was clearly the scenery from before, and Bai Ling was still sitting in the pavilion. From the beginning until now, the Sword Sect spiritual seal has changed owners over a dozen times. Half of them were able to enter the spiritual seal, and there were as many as 7 people who were able to pass the 4th trial. However, none of them were able to pass as quickly as you, Bai Ling said unhurriedly. His tone was elegant. However, there was no one who was able to solve the mystery of the Sword Sect spiritual seal. I wonder if you can become the first? Bai Ling seemed to be asking, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Senior, is there a 5th trial? Chu Mu asked. Of course there is, Bai Ling said slowly. The examinee of the 5th trial is me. Chu Mu was immediately shocked. Although he didn't know how strong Bai Ling was, being in charge of the 5th trial meant that he was stronger than the previous 4. Moreover, Bai Ling always gave Chu Mu an unfathomable feeling, which made him very wary. Senior, please give me your guidance, Chu Mu said respectfully. Then pay attention. I'm going to attack, Bai Ling said slowly. He didn't have a sword in his hand, nor did he stand up. However, Chu Mu was very vigilant. He was fully focused, and his sword intent controlled all his power, ready to counterattack at any time. Suddenly, Chu Mu seemed to feel a flash of light. Before he could react, his vision turned black, and he left the Sword Sect spiritual seal. I'm dead. In the secret room, Chu Mu was stunned. He couldn't believe that he had been killed without even seeing whether Bai Ling was there. With the experience of the 3rd trial, Chu Mu started to think carefully. However, he couldn't figure out why. After thinking hard, Chu Mu entered the Sword Sect spiritual seal again. Senior, I'm coming. Please attack, Chu Mu said, becoming even more vigilant. Then pay attention. I'm going to attack, Bai Ling said slowly. Chu Mu seemed to see a flash of sword light again, and his vision turned black again. Inconceivable, it was simply too inconceivable. It was as if Bai Ling had the ability to decide a person's life and death. Chu Mu didn't believe it. He entered the Sword Sect spiritual seal again, and the result was the same. He still vaguely saw a snow-white light that didn't seem sharp, and then he died. He entered again, died again, and again. In the blink of an eye, Chu Mu had entered the Sword Sect spiritual seal 30 times in a row, and he had died 30 times at Bai Ling's hands. After dying once more, Chu Mu couldn't help smiling bitterly. He had died 30 times in a row, and each time, he had died in an instant. Even now, he still didn't know what was going on. The only thing he was certain of was that Bai Ling's strength was different from the third trial. Bai Ling's strength far surpassed Chu Mu's. It was a realm that Chu Mu could only look up to. No wonder none of the dozens of masters were able to see through its mysteries, muttered Chu Mu. Feeling a bit irritated, Chu Mu thought for a moment and entered the Sword Sect spiritual seal once more. He didn't want to fight, but wanted to chat with Bai Ling. Bai Ling was the most special of all the challengers. He was the first person Chu Mu came into contact with, and also the first person to talk to Chu Mu. He was also the one who was willing to communicate with Chu Mu. He was different from the other 4 challengers. Perhaps he could find out the reason after communicating with Bai Ling, Sr. What happened just now? Chu Mu asked directly as soon as he entered. It wasn't good to beat around the bush when talking to an expert like Bai Ling. It was better to be direct. It's very simple. You're too weak, Bai Ling said directly and then changed the topic. However, compared to the dozens of predecessors, your sword technique is the most profound. You've reached the peak of one with the sword. Could it be that Senior's sword technique has already surpassed one with the sword? Even though he was certain, Chu Mu couldn't help but ask. Your swordsmanship is superb and unique, but do you know what your swordsmanship is lacking? Or you, what are you lacking? Not only did Bai Ling not answer Chu Mu's question, but he also asked, "What am I lacking?" Bai Ling's words seemed to have a strange power that made Chu Mu ponder. However, no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure it out. It couldn't be helped. Chu Mu was very smart, and his comprehension was monstrous, but he was still young. He had all kinds of experience, and although he was considered rich among his peers, he couldn't compare to an expert like Bai Ling. Experience was a very important part of intelligent life. Those with enough experience were more profound and experienced in both knowledge and handling of matters. No matter how intelligent a smart person was, without enough knowledge and experience, it was like a flower in the mirror or the moon in the water, unable to be used to its full potential. It was normal that Chu Mu couldn't figure it out. However, Bai Ling was calm and didn't say anything. He just let Chu Mu ponder like this. Time passed unknowingly. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Mu woke up. He had a vague feeling that he was about to grasp something, but he didn't. That feeling made him extremely depressed. Looking ahead, he didn't know when, but Bai Ling had left, leaving Chu Mu alone. With a sigh, Chu Mu left the Sword Sect's spirit seal. Without thinking about anything else, he directly left the cultivation room and went outside to take a look, relax, and change his mood. After walking around, he headed towards the sword crafting valley. Perhaps if he took a look at the forging of the sword, he would have a different understanding. The sword forging skills of the disciples of the sword crafting valley were not that high. Compared to Chu Mu, the difference was like heaven and earth, but Chu Mu was also watching with relish. It seemed that because of the arrival of the sect master, the disciples of the sword crafting valley worked even harder to forge their swords. All of them seemed to want to perform well and leave a deep impression on the sect master. This was also because Chu Mu had used his own ability to completely conquer them, causing them to admire him from the bottom of their hearts. This group of disciples seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Chu Mu found it funny and also gave them some pointers, causing them to admire him even more. After that, Chu Mu left the sword crafting valley and headed towards the treasure pill pavilion. Just like the disciples of the sword crafting valley, when the disciples of the treasure pill pavilion saw Chu Mu's arrival, they were all extremely excited and fought to perform. Chu Mu naturally would not favor one over the other, and similarly spoke out to give pointers to the disciples of the Treasure Pill Pavilion. After leaving the Treasure Pill Pavilion, Chu Mu arrived at a sword training field. Seeing a group of elite disciples practicing their swords, Chu Mu watched for a while and gave them some pointers. Immediately, all of the elite disciples felt as if they were suddenly enlightened. In a moment, their sword technique attainments rose by quite a bit. In the hearts of the disciples, Chu Mu's image was even more deeply rooted in their hearts. After cruising around and relaxing for a while, Chu Mu once again returned to the secret cultivation room. His depressed mood had already dissipated. Chu Mu calmed down and thought about it again. This time, he was thinking about sorting out his own life and his own path. Gradually, he went deeper and deeper,